Welcome, welcome, you're here at Wizardium. Today we present to you What If Sirius, Remus and Regulus Black raised Harry and Hermione together. Like and subscribe if you want more awesome stories. Sit back, relax and enjoy. Chapter 1, Godric's Hollow and what was found there. The sky over Godric's Hollow was wrong. Sirius felt it before he saw it, a wrongness in the air like a held breath, like the moment before a storm breaks, but worse, deeper, the kind of thing that settles in your sternum and doesn't leave. He'd been riding for 20 minutes, the motorbike screaming through the dark over Somerset, when the sensation hit him so hard he almost lost altitude. He'd steadied the handlebars by instinct and told himself it was nothing, told himself he was being paranoid, told himself James would laugh at him when he arrived and found everything fine. He was still telling himself that when he turned onto the lane and saw the house, half of it was gone. The upper floor had simply ceased to exist, the way things ceased to exist when the force that destroyed them was not fire or bomb or ordinary violence but something that bent the rules of the world. The remaining walls stood with the dazed look of survivors. Smoke moved through the wreckage with no particular urgency, as though it too wasn't sure what had just happened. Sirius landed the motorbike in the garden and didn't turn it off. He ran. James, the word came out of him like something torn. James, Lily, he found James first. He didn't look long, he couldn't. The stairs were partially intact and he took them 3 at a time, and on the landing, in the ruins of what had been a nursery sky where there should have been ceiling, cold October air pouring in, he stopped. Harry was in his cot. The cot was untouched. The whole small corner of the room was untouched, as though the destruction had gotten close and then thought better of it. And in the middle of all that impossible mercy, his godson was sitting up and looking at him with James's eyes and Lily's hair and a small red mark on his forehead shaped like nothing Sirius had ever seen. "Hey," Sirius said. His voice had gone completely. "Hey, bud, I've got you." Harry reached for him with both hands, the universal language, and Sirius picked him up and held him against his chest and stood in the wreckage of his best friend's home and breathed. He didn't cry, not yet. There was something happening in him that was too large for crying, something tectonic, the kind of grief that takes years to fully arrive. Right now there was only Harry, warm and solid against him, making a small indignant sound because Sirius was holding him too tight. "Sorry," Sirius murmured. "Sorry, I've got you, you're okay." He was turning to go back down the stairs when he heard the noise below, not the shifting of settling rubble, not the distant wail of someone in the village, but a specific and deliberate sound, someone moving carefully through the ground floor. Sirius pulled his wand. He came down the stairs 1 at a time, Harry tucked against his left side, wand extended in his right. The sitting room was dark, the kitchen beyond it darker still. He stepped over a fallen beam and said quietly, "I will curse first and ask questions later, so you'd better speak up." "It's me." The voice came from beside the cold fireplace. "Don't." Sirius had not heard that voice in 4 years. He had believed because he'd been told to believe, because everyone had, that it had been silenced permanently in a lake in Cornwall. He stood very still. Regulus Black stepped out of the shadow beside the fireplace. He looked terrible. He was thin in a way that spoke of long deprivation rather than recent illness, his dark hair longer than Sirius remembered, his face carrying the particular hollowness of someone who had spent years doing something that cost them everything. He was alive and he was standing in Godric's Hollow and he was looking at Harry with an expression Sirius couldn't immediately read. "You faked it," Sirius said. "Yes, creature, yes." Regulus's eyes moved to Sirius's face. I couldn't come back, not properly. I had work to do. There were things I'd found out, things that..." He stopped himself. "Not now, that's not now." He looked at Harry again. "He's alive, I thought he might be. The wards on this place were partially his mother's work and she was extraordinary, but I didn't know if they'd hold against what Voldemort brought here tonight." Sirius hadn't heard Voldemort's name spoken aloud in so long that it made the hair on his arms rise. Regulus said it flatly without flinching, which told Sirius more about what the past 4 years had done to his brother than anything else could have. "Lily's dead," Sirius said. "James is dead." "I know." Regulus said it quietly. There was no performance in his grief and no absence of it either. "I arrived 20 minutes ago. I needed to be sure the wards had fully collapsed before I came inside. There are sometimes secondary enchantments." He finally looked directly at Sirius. "You going to curse me?" "I'm deciding." "That's fair." They stood there in the ruined kitchen with Harry between them, and the cold crept in through the broken walls, and Sirius thought about all the years and all the silence and the dark mark burned into his brother's arm and James's face upstairs, and the fact that Regulus was standing here alive when he should have been dead in a cave, and he thought, later, all of that is for later. "Did you come here to take him?" Sirius asked. Regulus blinked. Something moved across his face, surprise maybe or pain. "No, I came because I felt the magic break and I knew what it meant and He paused. "No, I didn't come to take him. I don't know why I came, I just ran." "Yeah." Sirius shifted Harry to a more comfortable position. "Me too." The door opened. Both of them spun, wands up simultaneously, and Remus Lupin stopped in the doorway with his hands raised and his face the color of old ash. For a moment none of them moved. Then Remus's eyes found Harry and the breath went out of him like something had punched it free. "He's alive," Remus said. It wasn't quite a question. "Come in," Sirius said, "and shut the door, it's freezing." Remus came in and shut the door and then stood looking at the two of them, Sirius, Harry, Regulus, with an expression that cycled through several things too quickly to name. His eyes settled on Regulus and narrowed. "You're dead," Remus said. "Broadly, no," Regulus replied. "Reg faked it," Sirius said. "We're not dealing with that right now, Remus." He waited until Remus looked at him. "James is upstairs." Remus closed his eyes. He stood like that for 3 seconds, maybe 4, and in those seconds the lines of his face rearranged themselves into something older and more permanent. Then he opened his eyes and they were wet but steady. "Lily?" he asked. "No." Another silence. Harry, apparently deciding that the mood required his input, made a sound that was half babble, half something that might have been moony, and Remus crossed the room in 4 steps and took him with the practiced ease of someone who had held this child many times before. "Hey, pup," Remus said softly. "Hey, I've got you." "They'll send someone," Regulus said from his position by the fireplace where he had moved very slightly away from the scene with an awareness of his own status as an intruder. "Although we'll send someone or the ministry will come. We have very little time to decide what happens next." "What do you mean, what happens next?" Sirius said. "I'm taking him. I'm his godfather." "That was James's." "Dumbledore won't let you," Regulus said, not cruelly, simply. "You know that. You know what he'll say, that you're a target, that you know whose followers will come for you, that Harry needs to be hidden somewhere protected, and he'll have a plan for that, and it won't involve you." He paused. "And there's something else." He told them about the prophecy then, not all of it, he didn't know all of it, but enough. "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, born as the 7th month dies, the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal." Harry was marked. The scar on his forehead was not a wound, it was a mark. Sirius listened and felt the ground shift under him in a way that had nothing to do with the physical world. "Where did you hear this?" Remus asked. His voice was very controlled. "I have sources," Regulus said. "I've had 4 years to build sources. The Death Eaters talk. They talked about the prophecy before tonight. They talked about the Potter boy as though he were a piece on a game board." His jaw tightened. "He's not a piece on a game board. He's a child. Dumbledore will hide him with his family," Sirius said slowly. "That's what the plan always was if the worst happened, the Dursleys." The word fell into the room with a particular heaviness. All 3 of them were thinking it. Sirius had met Petunia Dursley once at James and Lily's wedding, and the memory was not one that inspired confidence. Remus had heard enough from Lily about her sister's feelings toward magic to draw his own conclusions. Regulus had never met the woman in his life, and even he seemed to understand that whatever expression had just crossed the other 2 men's faces did not suggest a warm and nurturing household. "No," Sirius said. "Sirius, no, Remus, no, absolutely not. James made me his godfather because he trusted me with his son's life. That is not a—" He stopped, started again. "That is not a technicality, that is not a title. That is an actual job that I was given, and I am not putting Harry in a house where he'll be, where Petunia will." He ran a hand through his hair. "No, Dumbledore will argue the blood wards," Remus said quietly. "Lily's sister. The protection that comes from—" "I know what he'll argue. I don't care what he'll argue. Moony, look at me." Sirius waited. Remus looked at him. "Are you going to let them take him?" Remus looked at Harry, who was currently examining Remus's coat button with serious concentration. Something in Remus's face went very still and then slowly resolved. "No," Remus said. They both looked at Regulus. Regulus had not moved from the fireplace. He was watching them with the expression of someone who had spent a long time making calculations and had just arrived at an answer he hadn't expected. "I'm a dead man," he said finally. "Officially, which means I can move without the ministry or Dumbledore tracking me. I have resources, money, safe locations, information. I know more about what Voldemort was doing and what he left behind than anyone alive." He paused. "I also have a debt. To Lily Potter specifically, and to the idea of doing something that isn't utterly contemptible with whatever time I have left." He looked at Harry. "I'm not suggesting I raise the boy, I'm suggesting I help." "You're coming with us," Sirius said. It was not a question. Regulus looked at him for a long moment. "If you'll have me." "You're my brother, Reg, you absolute idiot." Sirius's voice was rough. "You're always coming with us." Something cracked open briefly in Regulus's face and then closed again, not from coldness but from the particular discipline of someone who had learned not to let themselves feel things too quickly. "Right," he said. "Then we need to leave now. There's a second thing." "Of course there is," Remus said. 2 streets from here, there was a Muggle couple named Granger. I came past them on my way in. There were signs of a struggle, forced entry. The Death Eaters were in a panic tonight, scattered in every direction when he fell. Some of them ran this way." Regulus's voice was carefully flat. "The couple are dead, but there was a child." The silence this time was a different shape. "How old?" Sirius asked. "Young, very young, perhaps a year, perhaps a little more. A girl. She was in her cot, same as Harry. The Death Eaters didn't search the upstairs, just ran." He paused. "I covered her with a warming charm before I came here. She's all right. But she won't be for long, alone in a house with—" "Show me," Remus said. They went together through the dark Godric's Hollow streets, 3 men who should by any reasonable account have been enemies, with James Potter's son on Sirius's hip and somewhere ahead of them a girl who had no idea that the world she'd been born into had just been remade. The Granger house was a neat semi-detached on Hartley Lane. The front door was hanging open. Inside, the signs of what had happened were not extensive. These had been people in a hurry, not people with a point to prove, but they were unmistakable. Remus went upstairs. He came back down 2 minutes later with a dark-haired little girl wrapped in a yellow blanket, awake and watchful and entirely unafraid in the way that very young children sometimes are when the fear hasn't yet learned to reach them. She looked at Sirius with enormous brown eyes. Then she looked at Harry. Harry looked back. A conversation seemed to occur between them in the language that very small children share, consisting entirely of sounds and expressions, and at the end of it Harry reached out and grabbed a fistful of her blanket, and she permitted this with the air of someone who had decided to allow it. "Well," Sirius said. "She has no one," Remus said quietly. "I checked the house. There are no names, no numbers. I know who she is," Regulus said. Both of them turned. He was standing in the doorway, looking at the girl with an expression that was harder to read than usual. "Her name is Hermione. The Grangers were Voldemort used them occasionally. Teeth, the father was a dentist. He was the one who developed a charm-compatible anesthetic that could be used on wizards during dental procedures. Completely benign, completely muggle, no dark affiliations. They died because some frightened fool in a mask ran past their house and felt like it." His voice had gone very quiet. "Her name is Hermione Jean Granger and she's 14 months old and she has nobody." The three of them stood in the wreckage of the Granger house with a child each, and the night pressed in around them, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked and then went quiet. "We can't take 2 children, Remus said. He said it carefully, like he was testing the weight of the argument even as he made it, like he was hoping someone would knock it down. "We absolutely can take 2 children, Sirius said. "Sirius, Remus, look at her." Sirius gestured at Hermione, who was now successfully extracting her blanket from Harry's grip and looking deeply satisfied about this. "She's 14 months old, she's a witch, she has to be, doesn't she? If they were using her father's work, if they were in this world, that doesn't follow," Regulus said. "It does," Remus said quietly. "I felt it when I picked her up. She's got magic red, she's strong, whoever she is, she's very strong." He looked down at her, she looked back up at him with those enormous eyes. He was clearly already lost. "She can't go into the system. You know what the orphanages are like. You know what happens to magical children who go into muggle care not knowing." "I know," Regulus said. He was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't arguing against it. I was making sure you weren't making this decision by accident." "I never do anything by accident," Remus said, which was not entirely true, but Sirius decided this was not the moment. "Right," Sirius said. "So we're taking 2 children. "We're taking 2 children," Remus confirmed. "We're taking 2 children," Regulus said, and his voice had shifted just slightly into something that was not quite dry amusement but was in that neighborhood. "3 of us, 2 children. We are absconding from the remains of 2 crime scenes in the middle of the night with no legal standing, 1 fugitive, 1 werewolf and 1 officially deceased person, and we are going to raise these children." "When you say it like that," Sirius started. "I'm not criticizing it," Regulus said. "I'm cataloging it." "We need to go," Remus said. "Now someone will come, someone will have seen the lights, heard the noise. If Dumbledore gets here before we are gone, he won't stop us," Sirius said, and he meant it with every atom of conviction he possessed. "He'll try," Remus said. "And we can't afford a confrontation tonight, not here, not with the children. We go and we go now and we sort the rest later." He was right, Sirius knew he was right. The part of him that wanted to stand in the street and dare the whole world to come and try it had to be overruled by the part of him that was holding Harry and could feel the small warm weight of him and knew with absolute clarity that the job was the job. "The motorbike won't fit all of us," he said. "I have a car," Regulus said. 2 streets north, I disillusioned it." Of course he did. The car was a black Aston Martin, which might have seemed conspicuous except that Regulus had also done something to it that made it feel, to anyone looking directly at it, like something they'd rather not think about, which had a similar effect to invisibility and considerably less magical interference. Sirius strapped Harry into something that he improvised on the back seat with his jacket and a cushioning charm, and Remus did the same for Hermione on the other side, and the 2 children regarded each other across the small space between them with the solemn mutual assessment of people who have just been introduced at a party. Regulus drove. Sirius sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window at Godric's Hollow receding behind them and did not let himself look back at the house. "Where are we going?" Remus asked from the back. "Scotland," Regulus said. "There's a cottage, I've had it for 3 years, off every ministry record, warded 6 ways to Sunday. Nobody knows it exists except Creature, and Creature won't speak." "You planned for this," Sirius said. Regulus was quiet for a moment. "I planned for the possibility that things might go badly and I might need somewhere to go. I didn't plan for—" He stopped. "I didn't plan for this specifically." "How long have you been operating alone?" Remus asked. There was no judgment in it, only the question. "Since I left the cave, 4 years." A pause. "I destroyed 2 of them. The locket was the first. There are more, I don't know exactly how many, but more than 1, and they need to be found and destroyed before he comes back, because he will come back. The killing curse reflects, but the soul persists. I know enough about what he did to know that what happened tonight bought time, not permanence." The silence in the car had a texture to it. "You knew about the Horcruxes," Remus said. "I knew about 1, I've been working out the rest. It's slow work." Regulus's hands on the wheel were steady. "That's why I needed to stay dead, that's why I couldn't come back." Sirius turned to look at his brother in profile. The streetlights on the motorway caught his face in intervals, shadow and light, shadow and light. "You could have come to us," Sirius said. "We were in the Order, we could have helped." The order had a leak, Regulus said flatly. Someone was feeding information to Voldemort. I didn't know who. I couldn't trust. I couldn't risk the locket or what I'd found out until I understood the scope of it. He paused. I should have found a way to tell you I was alive. I know that. I'm not asking you to. Reg. Sirius reached over and gripped his brother's shoulder once briefly. We'll fight about it later. Drive. The motorway north was empty at this hour, and the children fell asleep somewhere around Carlisle, Harry first and then Hermione with her cheek against the rolled-up jacket, and the three men drove in the particular silence of people who have been through too much to speak and know they'll have to speak about it eventually, but not yet, not yet. Sirius watched the dark countryside slide past and thought about James. He thought about Lily. He thought about the last time he'd seen them, 2 weeks ago, Sunday lunch at Godric's Hollow with Harry careening around the sitting room at alarming speed for someone who'd only recently mastered walking, and Lily laughing at something Sirius had said, and James with his arm around Lily's shoulders looking like the happiest man alive. He thought about the fact that he should have been their secret keeper. He'd been supposed to be. He'd suggested the switch last minute, clever, unexpected. He'd trusted Peter and Peter had Peter. The name arrived in his mind like a coal dropped onto skin. Stop the car, he said. Regulus pulled over onto the hard shoulder. What? Peter knew, Sirius said. Peter was the secret keeper. James and Lily switched at the last minute and I was the decoy and I told Peter where they were. His voice was very quiet and very precise, like he was laying out facts one at a time to keep his hands from shaking. Peter told Voldemort. Peter sold them. Remus made a sound in the back that was not quite a word. I need to. Sirius started. No, Remus said sharply. Sirius had heard that sharpness maybe 3 times in the years he'd known Remus, and it always meant something was being held with great effort in check. No, you need to drive to Scotland. You need to not go after Pettigrew tonight. Moony, listen to me. Remus leaned forward between the seats. His eyes were steady, but there was something burning behind them. If you go after him tonight, you'll be arrested. They'll think you were in on it. They'll put you in Azkaban, and these children will lose another person, and Peter will disappear, and we'll have nothing. His jaw was tight. I want to kill him too, but not tonight. Sirius stared through the windscreen. The road stretched ahead, empty and dark. He'll run, Sirius said. Let him run, Regulus said quietly. He can only run so far, and you've spent years being clever. You know where he'll go to ground. He can't help it. He's a rat. The word carried a weight that had nothing to do with Animagi. Not tonight, Remus said again. Sirius breathed in, breathed out. Not tonight, he said. Regulus pulled back onto the motorway. They reached the cottage as the sky was beginning to think about grey at the edges, still dark, but committed now to becoming something else. It was on the edge of a village that wasn't quite large enough to be a village, tucked behind a stand of old birch trees with a low stone wall around the garden and a blue door. It looked like the kind of place where nothing bad had ever happened, which was probably partly Regulus's doing. Creature was there. He opened the door before Regulus knocked, and he looked at Sirius with an expression that mixed old resentment with something more complicated, and he looked at Remus with straightforward suspicion, and then he looked at the 2 sleeping children, and his ancient leathery face did something unexpected. Master Regulus is returned, Creature said. His voice was a ruin of a thing, centuries of service distilled into a rasp, and has brought guests. 2 children, Creature, Regulus said. They'll need a room with 2 cots. Can you manage that? Creature looked at the children again. Harry was awake now, blinking at the unfamiliar doorway. Hermione was still asleep against Remus's shoulder. Creature can manage, the elf said, and then very quietly, almost beneath hearing, they are warm. Yes, Regulus said, they are. Inside, the cottage was small and sensible, nothing like Grimmauld Place, no portraits, no dark artifacts, no oppressive ancestral weight, books on shelves. A fire already lit, a kitchen that smelled of something hearty and recent. Regulus had been living here at least partially for some time. Sirius put Harry down in the sitting room, and Harry immediately began exploring the perimeter with the methodical intensity of a very small explorer. Hermione woke up as Remus set her on the rug and sat up and looked around the room with exactly the same expression. Then she reached over and removed a wooden toy horse from Harry's hands. Harry stared at her. She began examining the horse. Harry sat down next to her and watched, apparently deciding that the examination was worth observing. Right, Sirius said. He sat on the floor with them because there seemed to be nowhere else to be. Okay, we're here. Remus sat on the sofa above him, elbows on his knees. Regulus stood by the fireplace again, which seemed to be his default position, the one that kept him simultaneously present and available to leave. We need a plan, Remus said. We need sleep, Sirius said. The plan can wait 3 hours. Sirius, Remus, I will make better plans after 3 hours of sleep than I will make right now. Also, one of them needs. He sniffed the air and made a face. Creature, he called, from somewhere in the depths of the cottage. Creature is already attending to it. An astonishing amount of efficient nappy changing occurred over the following 20 minutes, at the end of which both children were clean and fed, and placed in the 2 small cots that had appeared in the room upstairs as if they had always been there. Harry went down with the philosophical ease of a child who has decided that the strange night was, on balance, acceptable. Hermione lay on her back and stared at the ceiling for a while, apparently reviewing events, and then closed her eyes. Sirius stood in the doorway watching them breathe. He'd thought in some distant theoretical part of himself that planned for bad things because that's what you did when you lived the kind of life they lived, about what he would do if something happened to James and Lily. He'd thought about it and dismissed it every time because the alternative was unthinkable. And now here he was on the other side of the unthinkable, and it turned out that the world kept going and you kept going with it, because what else was there? Harry's chest rose and fell. Hermione's small fist was curled against her cheek. I've got you, he thought, both of you, whatever it takes, whatever comes. He went back downstairs. Remus was in the kitchen making tea with the focused intensity of a man who needed to do something with his hands. Regulus was sitting at the kitchen table with a leather journal open in front of him, writing in a small, precise hand. Sirius poured himself tea and sat across from his brother. The Horcruxes, he said quietly. Tomorrow, Regulus said without looking up. What else don't I know? Regulus looked up then. His face in the kitchen light was tired in a way that went beyond the night, tired in a way that had been building for years. Quite a lot, he said, but none of it changes tonight. Then what does change tonight? Regulus set down his pen. Looked at Sirius with the particular directness that had always been the difference between them. Sirius ran at things. Regulus looked at them first and ran at them only when he was sure. We made a choice, Regulus said. 2 children, 3 of us, no legal protection, no institutional backing, no one who knows we're here. He paused. It's not a small thing. No, Sirius agreed. I need you to understand that I'm in this. Not halfway, not until it becomes inconvenient. If you'll have me, I already said. I know what you said. I need you to understand what I mean. Regulus's voice was very careful. I did terrible things. I wore the mark. I believed things. I was raised to believe things, and I believed them for longer than I should have. I know what I am. I know what the name Black means to most of the people we'll have to deal with. I'm not asking for absolution. I'm asking whether there's a place for me in this. Sirius looked at his brother. He looked at the lines of his face, the careful way he held himself, the journal full of years of solitary work toward a goal that nobody had asked him to pursue. He thought about the cave, about what Creature must have told Regulus about the locket, about the fact that his little brother had chosen to go back and try to undo a wrong that most people would have just walked away from. There's a place, Sirius said. There's always been a place. You were just bloody somewhere else. Remus set a mug in front of each of them and sat down. We're going to need rules, Remus said. For this, for raising them, we need to agree on things. We need to be consistent. Whose rules? Sirius asked. All of ours. Remus wrapped both hands around his mug. They're going to grow up knowing who they are and where they come from and what happened to their parents. No secrets, not about that. They deserve to know. Not when they're 1, obviously, but when they're old enough. Agreed, Sirius said. Agreed, Regulus said. They're going to be extraordinary, Remus continued. Both of them. I felt Hermione's magic. It's immense. And Harry, he paused. Harry has the scar. We don't know yet what it means or what's in it, but there's something in it, and we need to be prepared for the fact that his magic is going to be singular. We train them, Sirius said, properly. Not just Hogwarts curriculum, not just standard ministry approved, not just offense, Regulus said. Both of them looked at him. I know that's where your mind goes. It goes there for me too, but if what I suspect about Voldemort's return is correct, they're going to need everything: strategy, history, dark arts knowledge. Without the dark arts practice, political awareness. They're going to need to be able to walk into any room and understand every person in it. That sounds a lot like manipulation, Sirius said. It sounds like survival, Regulus said quietly. A pause. Outside, the first birds were beginning to make tentative suggestions about the coming morning. The fire crackled. Somewhere upstairs, one of the children made a small sound and settled. We keep them off the radar as long as possible, Remus said. Hogwarts is 10 years away. That's 10 years to make them ready. 10 years to be a family first, Sirius said. He hadn't planned to say it that way. It came out and sat on the table between them, and both Remus and Regulus looked at him, and something shifted in the shape of the room. Yes, Remus said after a moment. That first. Regulus said nothing, but he picked up his pen, and in the margin of his careful journal, beside all the calculations and the dark knowledge and the years of solitary purpose, he wrote something small. Sirius didn't see what it was. He didn't need to. They sat in the kitchen while the night became morning, 3 men with difficult histories and impossible futures, and upstairs 2 children slept through the first night of the rest of their lives, and outside the birch trees were beginning to emerge from the dark, white and distinct, like something new. The scar on Harry's forehead was quiet. Hermione's fist was still curled against her cheek. Whatever was coming, and something was always coming, they all knew that. It would find them together, and it would find the children ready. That was enough for now. That was everything. Chapter 2, The Shape of a Family. The first rule of the cottage was that nobody touched Regulus's journal. Harry broke this rule at age 2.5 by sitting on it. Hermione broke it at 3 by attempting to read it, which she couldn't yet do, but that wasn't the point. Regulus responded to both incidents with the same expression, a long, careful look that communicated nothing except that he had clocked the transgression and was filing it somewhere, and then he put the journal on a higher shelf and said nothing. Sirius thought this was hilarious. Remus thought it was a reasonable response. Hermione, who had already developed a very precise understanding of the difference between wrong and not yet allowed, immediately began working out how to reach the higher shelf. This was essentially the cottage in miniature. They'd been there 3 months before anyone tried to find them, and then it was Dumbledore, which they'd expected. He'd appeared at the blue door on a grey February morning with his half-moon glasses and his particular brand of patient authority and said, "Sirius, I think we need to talk about Harry." Sirius had opened the door wider and said, "He's fine, goodbye." "Sirius, Albus." He'd kept his voice level. "I am Harry's legal guardian. I am his godfather. James made me that in writing, witnessed, filed with Gringotts, and you know that because I know you've checked. He's safe, he's loved, you are not taking him." Dumbledore had looked past him into the cottage, where Harry was visible in the sitting room determinedly stacking wooden blocks into a tower that kept collapsing, and beside him Hermione was stacking her own tower and making her stay up through what appeared to be pure force of will. "And the girl?" Dumbledore had asked. "Hermione Granger, her parents are dead, she had no one, she has us now." A pause. "Unless you'd like to explain to a 2-year-old why she needs to go somewhere else." Dumbledore had been quiet for a long moment. His eyes, when they met Sirius's, were not angry. They were something more complicated than angry, thoughtful and sad, and perhaps a little bit surprised, which Sirius had found deeply satisfying. "The blood wards," Dumbledore said. "Petunia can't protect him from what's coming," Sirius said. "I can." He paused. "We can." Another long look. Then Dumbledore had said, "I will need to know they're safe. They're safe. I will need. You'll know they're alive and cared for. The rest isn't your information." Sirius had held the door. "Goodbye, Albus." He'd closed it, stood with his back against the wood, heart hammering. From the sitting room, Harry's tower had collapsed again. "Oh no," Harry said with great feeling. From upstairs, where he'd been listening through the floor, Regulus's voice drifted down. "Well handled." "Shut up," Sirius said, but he was already smiling. Dumbledore came back twice more in the following year. Each time, Sirius sent him away with progressively less politeness and progressively more information about Harry and Hermione's well-being, because Remus had argued reasonably that keeping Dumbledore entirely in the dark would make him more likely to act unilaterally, and giving him occasional scraps kept him at a manageable distance. It worked. By Harry's 3rd birthday, the visits stopped. The wards that Regulus built around the cottage over those first 2 years were extraordinary. Not just detection charms and concealment, but something deeper, older, a layered architecture of protection that drew on both black family magic and things Regulus had learned in 4 years of operating in the dark. Sirius helped where he could. Remus contributed elements that had more to do with nature than spellwork, the kind of wardings that were taught in old texts and barely remembered. Creature maintained all of it with silent pride. Nobody found them. The children grew. Harry at 3 was a small, explosive, dark-haired boy who had inherited his mother's laugh and his father's complete inability to back down from any challenge regardless of personal cost. He loved flying. Sirius had put him on a toy broom at 18 months, and the look on Harry's face had been one of the purest things any of them had ever seen, a recognition, a "this is it." And he loved Remus reading to him at night, and he loved Hermione in the specific, uncomplicated way that very young children love the person who has always been there, which is to say completely and without reservation, and with the implicit understanding that this is simply how things are. Hermione at 3 was already alarming. She taught herself to read at 2.5 using a combination of the books on Regulus's lower shelves, which were mostly advanced theory texts that she couldn't comprehend but clearly found satisfying as objects, and a dog-eared copy of Beatrix Potter that Remus had acquired from a charity shop in the village. By 3 she was reading anything that held still long enough. By 3.5 she had started asking questions that none of them had good answers to. "Why did my parents die?" she asked Remus one afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table with a book in her lap and the matter-of-fact directness of someone who had been thinking about this for a while. Remus was making soup. He turned the heat down and sat across from her. "Because some very frightened, very cruel people did something terrible," he said. He'd thought about how to answer this question. He'd thought about it for approximately 2.5 years. Hermione considered this. "Were they bad? The people who hurt your parents?" "Yes." "Are they going to hurt us?" "No," he said it without hesitation. "We won't let that happen." "How do you know?" "Because we're very good at not letting things happen," Remus said. "And because you and Harry are going to be very good at it too." Hermione looked at him for a moment with those ancient brown eyes. Then she looked back at her book. "Okay," she said and turned the page. He told Sirius about it that night quietly after the children were asleep. Sirius listened from the floor where he'd been doing something incomprehensible with a set of papers from Gringotts. "She'll ask more," Sirius said. "I know. About her parents, about Harry's parents, about the war, about Voldemort." "I know." Remus folded his hands. "That's why we tell them, actually tell them, when they're ready. Harry's going to take it hard." "Harry's going to be angry," Remus said. "There's a difference. Anger is useful." A pause. "We just have to make sure he knows what to do with it." Regulus was present for this conversation, which happened more and more often, him being present in a room while Sirius and Remus talked about the children, initially as an observer and then gradually as a participant, offering the occasional precise opinion and then retreating again. He was still learning how to do this, Sirius thought. Learning how to be in a family rather than managing one from a distance. "Tell them everything," Regulus said now from behind his journal. "Don't soften it. They'll find out the unsoftened version eventually, and if they learn they were managed, they'll stop trusting you." "You sound like you have experience with this," Sirius said. "Mother managed everything," Regulus said simply. "I didn't stop trusting her, I just stopped telling her things." He turned a page. "Don't do that to them." The magic started in earnest when Harry was 4. Sirius had been expecting it. In a general way, accidental magic in small children was normal, an overflow of emotion before they had the vocabulary of wand and word to direct it deliberately. What he had not been expecting was the scale. Harry had been outside in the garden with Sirius, throwing a ball against the stone wall, and Sirius had come inside to get water and been gone perhaps 4 minutes. When he came back out, Harry was 15 feet in the air, not on a broom, just in the air, standing on nothing, looking down at the garden with an expression of mild interest. "Harry," Sirius said very calmly. "I went up," Harry said. "I can see that. Can you come down?" Harry considered this. He came down. He landed on the grass with a small thump and looked up at Sirius. "Do it again," he asked. "Not today," Sirius said. "Come inside. I need to get Remus and your Uncle Reg." He was still working out what the children should call Regulus. Uncle had emerged organically and none of them had corrected it. Harry levitated again 3 days later, this time in the kitchen during breakfast, when a disagreement over the last piece of toast had reached its natural conclusion. He rose about 2 feet off his chair, still holding his fork, and looked at Hermione across the table with the quiet authority of someone who had just made a point. Hermione, who had been reaching for the toast, stopped. She looked at Harry floating serenely above his chair, then she looked at the toast. Then she held out her hand and the toast lifted off the plate and came to her. She met Harry's eyes. Harry landed. She bit the toast. "Right," Remus said from the doorway where he'd been watching this. "I think we start lessons earlier than planned." They began that week. Not formal lessons, nothing like the rigid structure of a proper magical education, but something more organic than that, built around the children's natural curiosity rather than fighting it. Remus led most of it because Remus was the teacher by nature, patient and thorough, able to explain things at 6 different levels of complexity until the right one landed. Sirius handled the physical elements, flying properly, basic movement charms, anything that involved doing rather than understanding. Regulus handled everything else. Regulus's lessons were different from the others. He didn't explain much. He showed things, asked questions, waited for the children to work backwards to the answer. He taught them about magical theory not as a series of facts but as a language, a way of reading the world. He taught them about the history of pure-blood ideology with the particular clarity of someone who had believed it, rejected it, and now understood it well enough to explain exactly where and why it was wrong. Harry sat through all of this with the focused attention he gave to anything that interested him, which was most things. Hermione took notes. She had started taking notes at 4 in a small orange notebook that Remus had given her, and her handwriting was initially incomprehensible but improved rapidly. "You don't have to write everything down," Regulus told her once. "I know," she said, and kept writing. He did not argue. He had, Sirius noticed, stopped arguing with Hermione on points of method. He'd learned, as they all had learned, that Hermione Jean Granger's methods were her own, and she would defend them with a precision and persistence that could outlast any opposition. What she could not do in those early years was lose. This was the one thing that worried Remus, not her brilliance, not her magic, but her relationship with being wrong. When Harry made a mistake, he swore or laughed or immediately tried again. When Hermione made a mistake, something in her face went briefly dark and complicated before she controlled it, and she would return to the problem with a focus that looked like determination from the outside but felt, to anyone watching closely, more like something she was afraid of. Remus talked to her about it once when she was 5 and had spent an entire afternoon trying to master a simple levitation charm and failed repeatedly, and was now sitting outside in the twilight garden with her orange notebook, rewriting her notes with unnecessary force. He sat down next to her in the grass. "You got it on the 14th try," he said. "I should have gotten it on the 1st, she said. "Why?" She looked at him. "Because I understood the theory." "Understanding theory and casting spells are different skills," he said. "Harry can cast things he doesn't understand at all yet. You understand things you can't always cast yet. Neither of you has the complete picture, that's why we practice." She thought about this. Harry's better at the casting part. For now, in some areas you're better at other things. He's not bothered by it. She wasn't saying it jealously. She was saying it as a factual observation, trying to understand something. "He just tries again. Harry is very good at not carrying things forward," Remus said. "That's one of his gifts. You carry everything forward. That's one of yours. The trick is knowing when each approach serves you." She thought about that for a longer time, then she closed the notebook. "Will you teach me the theory for the next charm?" she asked, "so I can think about it overnight." "Yes," he said, "but eat dinner first." She ate dinner first. The conversation found its way to Sirius that night, the same way all their significant conversations about the children found their way to everyone eventually. They talked, the 4 of them, not with the formality of a scheduled meeting but organically in kitchens and doorways and beside fires. The ongoing project of raising 2 extraordinary children discussed between people who'd each contributed a different piece of the picture. "She's hard on herself," Sirius said. "She will be," Regulus said. "She's driven by something, we don't know yet what it is." "She lost her parents," Remus said quietly. "So did Harry. Harry was 1, he doesn't remember them. Hermione was 14 months, she doesn't have memories exactly, but she has something, the shape of a loss she can't name." Remus was quiet for a moment. I think she works hard because somewhere in her she's afraid that not being enough is what gets people killed. The kitchen was very still. Then we make sure she knows she's enough, Sirius said. We already do, Remus said. She knows it up here. He touched his temple. We're working on getting it here. He touched his chest. She's 5, Sirius said. Yes, and she's already one of the most remarkable people I've ever met, and she's 5 and she thinks she should be better. He looked at his tea. She's going to be extraordinary. I just want her to know that being extraordinary doesn't mean being flawless. Regulus said nothing. He was looking at the table with an expression that suggested this conversation had found him somewhere personal, and he was not planning to acknowledge it. Sirius let him not acknowledge it. The years moved the way years do when you're not trying to hold them, in glimpses rather than sequences, in moments that you only recognize as significant later. The first time Harry flew the full length of the garden on a proper broom and came down laughing so hard he fell off the landing, and Hermione appeared from the cottage door to ask what had happened, and Harry said I flew too fast, and Hermione said how fast, and then she asked Sirius to take her up with him, and rode pillion with her arms around his waist and her face into the wind, and came down with her hair wrecked and her eyes brilliant. The first time Regulus sat at the kitchen table across from Harry and played chess with him and Harry won, not because Regulus let him, but because Harry had worked out aged 6 that Regulus always sacrificed his queen as a feint and had started planning 3 moves past it. Regulus had looked at the board for a long time after and then looked at Harry and said very seriously, again. They'd played until midnight. Sirius had stood in the doorway watching the two of them across the board and felt something so complicated and warm that it had nowhere to go except out through his face. The first time Remus's monthly absence, handled carefully, the transformation taking place in a contained space in the hills above the cottage that Regulus had specially warded, became something Harry and Hermione understood. They were 6 and Harry had asked quietly why Remus sometimes went away at the full moon and looked tired when he came back. Sirius had told him. Harry had listened. Then he'd said, "Is it painful?" "Yes," Sirius said. Harry thought about this. "Can we make it less painful?" "We're working on that." "Okay." Harry had gone back to his book. Then after a moment, "He's still Remus when he comes back." "Always," Sirius said. "Okay." He turned a page. "That's what matters." They told Hermione at the same time in the same conversation, and she had asked 11 immediate follow-up questions about the biology of lycanthropy, which Sirius had answered as accurately as he could. And then she had gone and found Remus and asked him if she could see the warded space in the hills, because she was thinking about whether the warding specifications could be improved for comfort. Remus had looked at her for a moment with the expression he sometimes got, the one that said the world had given him something he didn't think he deserved, and then said yes, come on then. They were 7 when the first real lesson in wandless magic happened, and it was not planned by anyone. It was February, cold with ice on the garden flagstones. Harry had been trying to get a kite to fly in insufficient wind, while Hermione read on the bench and Sirius and Regulus argued about something from a comfortable distance near the door. The kite wasn't going to fly, the wind was dead, and Harry had been running with it for 20 minutes and it kept falling and he was starting to run out of patience. Then he stopped running. He stood in the middle of the garden holding the kite string and looked at the kite lying in the frost and went very still. The wind came, not a gust, not a natural shift. A sustained, deliberate wind that rose from nowhere and caught the kite and took it up, and Harry paid out the string with both hands and watched it go, and the wind moved with the kite, tracking it, responsive to it. Hermione had put her book down, she was watching. The kite went up 40 feet 60, leveled off in the invented wind, steady and bright against the grey February sky. Sirius and Regulus had both gone very quiet by the door. "Harry," Regulus said carefully. "I know," Harry said without looking away from the kite. He was concentrating on it the way Hermione concentrated on a page she was reading, completely absorbed. "I know I'm doing it, I can feel it. Can you hold it?" "Yes." "For how long?" Harry smiled. It was James's smile, the one that meant watch me. "How long do you want?" He held the wind for 11 minutes until Sirius called him in for lunch and let it go so gradually that the kite drifted down like it was tired rather than dropping. He reeled in the string and handed the kite to Hermione, who had come to stand beside him, and said, "Your turn." "I can't do wind," Hermione said. "You can do something," Harry said. She looked at the kite, she looked at the grey sky, she held the kite string and closed her eyes. The kite rose, no wind. The kite rose straight up, perfectly vertical, perfectly still, hovering in windless air through nothing but Hermione's will, a neat and absolute defiance of physics that made Regulus exhale sharply through his nose, and Sirius grabbed the doorframe. She held it up there for 17 minutes without apparent effort, her face calm and entirely focused. Then she opened her eyes and lowered it and handed the string back to Harry. She said. "Yeah," Harry agreed. Inside, Regulus wrote 3 pages in his journal without stopping. Sirius made lunch and set the table and thought about the prophecy and what it meant that Harry could call wind from nothing and Hermione could stop needing wind altogether, and he thought about the world that was waiting for them outside this cottage and the people in it who would want to use these children as weapons or fear them as threats, and he thought, not yet, you're not ready for them yet. The lessons intensified after that naturally without a formal decision being made. Regulus began teaching them occlumency at 7, Not the formal version, not the cold, invasive style that Sirius associated with pureblood dueling culture, but something quieter, more architectural, building rooms inside yourself where you kept things safe. Both children took to it differently. Harry learned it physically, associating it with the feeling of raising a shield, a defensive posture. Hermione learned it intellectually, constructing what she called her filing system, an internal structure of extraordinary complexity that Regulus examined with the expression of a watchmaker looking at a mechanism more sophisticated than any he'd built. She shouldn't be able to do this at 7, Regulus told Sirius quietly. She also read your journal at 3, Sirius said. Stop being surprised. I'm not surprised, I'm recalibrating. They began teaching them about the wider world more deliberately as they approached 8 and 9, not just magic but politics, history, the landscape of the wizarding world as it had been and as it was now post-Voldemort. They taught them about the Death Eaters with names and specifics. Lucius Malfoy, still free, still wealthy, still influential. Bellatrix Lestrange in Azkaban, the Lestrange brothers. They taught them about Azkaban and what it did to people, and why the Dementors were a problem that nobody in the Ministry wanted to solve. Harry listened to all of this with a face that was getting harder to read as he got older. He was learning Regulus's trick of keeping things off his face, the absorbing useful skills from everyone around him. But sometimes, particularly when Voldemort was discussed, something moved behind his eyes that Sirius recognized. It was not fear. It was the thing that came after fear is removed, the clean, cool anger of someone who knows exactly what was taken from them. Do you want to talk about it? Sirius asked him once, age 8, after a long session with Regulus about the First Wizarding War. Not yet, Harry said. Okay, I will though when I've thought about it more. I'll be here, Harry nodded. He went outside and flew the garden at speed until his hair was completely destroyed and he came back inside looking substantially better and ate an enormous dinner, and that was that. Hermione processed differently. She asked questions. Endless, precise, interconnected questions that burrowed into a topic from every angle until she had a three-dimensional model of it in her head. She asked about her parents once at 8, who they were, what they were like, whether anyone had known them. Remus told her what Regulus had found out, that her father had been kind and careful and quietly proud of his work, that her mother had apparently laughed very easily, that they had been by all accounts good people who happened to be in the wrong world at the wrong time. Hermione had listened carefully. She had not cried. She had asked what their names were. Richard and Jean, Remus said. She wrote it in her orange notebook. She'd gone through 4 of them by now and kept all the old ones on her shelf, dated and ordered. She kept their names in the most recent one on a page by themselves, and Remus never asked to see it, but he was glad she'd written it somewhere. The summer they were 9, something changed in the cottage. Not badly, not like a fracture, but more like a settling, the way a house adjusts when all the weight has finally found where it belongs. It was something in the way Regulus started talking in the evenings, the way he'd begun to leave his journal on the kitchen table rather than taking it to his room, the way he'd started showing the children things from it. Not the dangerous sections, not the Horcrux research, but his notes on magical theory, his observations about spellwork, the elaborate diagrams that mapped magical genealogies like star charts. Harry had called it the Star Book once at age 3, and the name had stuck. Star Book, which had once been the most private document in the cottage, was now occasionally left open on the kitchen table for the children to look through. You've changed, Sirius told Regulus one evening. Regulus considered this as if it were a hypothesis. You leave the journal out. It contains things they should know. You smile at Hermione's questions, a pause. She asks good questions. Reg, Sirius looked at his brother. You know you're allowed to love them. It's actually permitted. Regulus didn't answer immediately. He looked at the empty doorway through which both children had recently disappeared in the direction of the garden. I was not raised to, he stopped, started again. The people I was raised to love I hurt, he said, or failed to protect or abandoned. The words were precise and careful and clearly something he'd had arranged in his head for a while. I find it another stop. Terrifying, Sirius offered. Instructive, Regulus said, to try again. Sirius gave him a moment. Then he said, they love you, you know, both of them. Harry thinks you're the cleverest person alive, which is a direct quote. Hermione told Remus last week that you're the only one who doesn't simplify things when you talk to her. Regulus looked at the table. You're their family, Reg, Sirius said. That's real, nothing about the past undoes it. From the garden came the sound of Harry and Hermione arguing about something. The words weren't clear, but the tone was entirely characteristic. That specific back and forth of two people who know each other so well that their disagreements move very fast and resolve without much damage. A pause, then laughter, then silence, which meant they'd gone back to whatever project had preceded the argument. Regulus said, I used to think the things I'd done meant I didn't get to have this. And now? A long pause. Now I think perhaps the things I'd done mean I have to work for it. He looked at Sirius. Which is better, actually. Things you work for tend to last. That's almost profound, Sirius said. Go away. I'm sitting in my own kitchen. Then be quiet in it. Outside, Harry had apparently discovered a new use for a levitation charm that made Hermione say, loudly and with authority, that is a terrible idea, and I'm not letting you do it to me. which meant Harry was absolutely already doing it to himself. Sirius stood up from the table and went to the window and looked out at the garden where Harry was currently hovering approximately 8 feet off the ground in the growing dark, arms out, grinning, and Hermione was standing below him with her hands on her hips but her face betraying her. "Come down before you fall," she called up. "I'm not going to fall," Harry said. "You always say that right before he fell." Dangerously, he caught himself about 2 feet from the ground with the casual instinct of someone who'd been doing this for years, but the landing was undignified and loud, and Hermione covered her mouth with her hand and laughed until she had to sit on the garden bench. Harry sat up in the frost with his hair in his face and his eyes bright and said, "Okay, that part I didn't plan." "Incredible," she said. "Okay, but watch, I've been working on, it's nearly dark. It's fine, Sirius." He called toward the window. "Tell her it's fine." Sirius opened the window. Both of them looked up at him, faces tipped back in the last light. "It's fine," he said. "Sirius," Remus said from directly behind him. "Dinner in 20 minutes, Sirius amended. Hermione gave him a look that was so precisely Remus's look that Sirius had to bite the inside of his cheek. Harry had already launched himself upward again, laughing. Sirius watched them from the window, and the ache in his chest was not grief anymore, not entirely. It was something that had grown alongside the grief without replacing it, something that had James's laugh in it and Lily's eyes and 2 children who were neither of their parents but were becoming day by day entirely themselves. It was 10 years since Godric's Hollow. It was 10 years since the world broke and they'd run through the dark with 2 babies and an impossible plan. On the table behind him, Regulus had gone back to his journal. In it somewhere was the name of another Horcrux. The war had not ended, it had only paused. But for now in the garden, Harry was teaching Hermione to fall safely from height, and Hermione was teaching Harry the precise angle that made the difference between falling and controlled descent, and their voices came through the window in the cold evening air, and the cottage behind him was warm with dinner cooking and Remus's quiet movement in the kitchen and Regulus's pen on paper. Sirius breathed it in. The Hogwarts letters were coming. The wider world was coming. Everything that had been waiting was going to arrive, and when it did it would find 2 children who had been loved without condition and taught without limit and raised to be afraid of nothing. He was almost sorry for whatever came next. Almost. Chapter 3, Letters and Old Grudges. The letters arrived on a Tuesday in July, which was the kind of unremarkable detail that somehow made everything more real. Harry found them first. He'd been up before anyone else, which was unusual. Harry was not a morning person in the way that Hermione was not a morning person. Except Hermione compensated by being ferociously efficient once awake, and Harry compensated by being amiable and slightly dangerous in the way of someone operating at 70%. He'd come downstairs for water, walked past the front door and stopped. 2 letters on the mat, thick cream envelopes, green ink. He picked them up and read the addresses and stood in the hallway for a moment in the early morning light with both letters in his hands and something settling in his chest that he'd been waiting for without quite knowing he was waiting for it. Then he went upstairs and knocked on Hermione's door. "It's 5:30, she said from inside. The letters came. Silence, then the sound of rapid movement. The door opened. Hermione was already in her dressing gown and her hair was doing what it always did in the morning, which was stage a comprehensive structural rebellion, and her eyes were very bright. She took her letter from him, turned it over, ran her thumb across the wax seal. "Open it," Harry said. "Together," she said. They sat on the top stair and opened them together. Harry read his through once quickly and then again slowly. The words were formal and impersonal in that particular way of official correspondence that had been written the same way for several centuries and was not going to be changed on account of any individual recipient. But what they said, stripped of the formality, was, "You belong here." He looked at the supply list. Wands, robes, standard book of spells grade 1, cauldron, pewter, standard size. "I already own half of these," Hermione said, studying her own list. "You already own books 5 and 6, Harry said. "We've had them for 2 years. Regulus assigned them." "I know." He looked at the Hogwarts crest at the top of the letter, the eagle and the snake and the badger and the lion. "Which house do you think?" "Gryffindor," she said immediately. "For you." "You." She considered this with the genuine intellectual interest she brought to everything. "I genuinely don't know. The books say Ravenclaw values intelligence and learning, but Gryffindor values courage and Hufflepuff values loyalty, and I think I have arguments for 3 of those." "Not Slytherin." Regulus was Slytherin. So was Reg, and he's— "I know, I didn't say it was bad, I said I had arguments for 3. She folded her letter precisely along its original creases. "House doesn't matter that much anyway." "It really doesn't," said Regulus's voice from the bottom of the stairs. They both looked down. Regulus was standing in the hallway in his shirt sleeves with a mug of tea, looking up at them with the composed morning face he always had, the one that suggested he'd been awake for some time and had already thought about several things. "You knew they were coming today," Harry said. "I knew approximately when they'd come. The timing depends on the headmaster's discretion." He took a measured sip of tea. "Congratulations." It was not an effusive word. From Regulus it landed like a precise gift, chosen, not automatic. Harry grinned. He couldn't help it. "We're going." "You're going," Regulus said, which was always the plan. "Are you worried?" Hermione asked. A pause. "No." He looked at them both. "I find I'm not particularly. Should I be?" "Probably not," Harry said. No, Hermione agreed. Regulus nodded, satisfied with this, and went back to the kitchen. A minute later, the smell of toast began drifting up the stairs, which was how Regulus expressed most things he didn't have words for. Sirius's response to the letters was considerably louder. He read them at the breakfast table and then picked Harry up out of his chair in a hug that lifted him fully off the floor, which Harry accepted with the long-suffering patience of someone who had learned that this was just how Sirius operated in moments of high emotion. "Hogwarts," Sirius said. "My son, you're going to Hogwarts." "I'm not your son," Harry said from approximately Sirius's collarbone. "No, you're my godson, which is better." He set Harry down and immediately grabbed Hermione, who was substantially less tolerant of unexpected physical contact but had over the years developed a specific exception for Sirius in his most enthusiastic moments. "And you, look at you, brilliant, terrible children." "We're not terrible," Hermione said. "You absolutely are. It's your best quality." He released her and sat down and was abruptly, briefly, something other than enthusiastic. A flash of something quieter and more complicated there and gone, and Sirius being serious, it went into his tea rather than anywhere anyone could see it. "Diagon Alley," he said. "Next week." "We should plan it," Remus said, appearing from the kitchen doorway with the second pot of tea and the particular look of someone who had already been planning it quietly for some time. "Plan what? We go, we buy things, we eat at the Leaky Cauldron, we plan it," Remus said, setting down the pot, "because Harry Potter's first public appearance in 10 years is going to be significant, and I would like it to not become a scene." The table went slightly quiet. Harry hadn't thought about that. He'd thought about Diagon Alley as the place described in Regulus's stories and Sirius's anecdotes, the one shop, the apothecary, Gringotts with its goblin-staffed vaults and its roller coaster carts. He hadn't thought about what he represented to the people who'd be there. "The boy who lived," he said. "The title is rubbish," Regulus said without looking up from his journal. "Agreed," Harry said, "but that's what they'll think." "They'll stare," Hermione said, not unkindly, matter-of-factly. "And some of them will want to touch your scar." "Nobody is touching his scar," Sirius said. "Nobody is," Harry agreed, "including people who ask politely." "Good," Sirius pointed at him. "That's settled." The planning happened over 3 evenings. Remus mapped out the route through the alley. Regulus provided current intelligence on which families were likely to be present. The school year starting in September meant July was peak Diagon Alley season for Hogwarts families, and which of those families they needed to be prepared for. The Malfoys were at the top of this list. "Lucius will be there," Regulus said. "He always takes Draco in July. It's a performance as much as a shopping trip, the Malfoy heir being seen in all the right places by all the right people." "I've never met Draco Malfoy," Harry said. "No, but Lucius knows who you are. He'll seek you out." "Why? Because you're a variable he hasn't controlled," Regulus said. "You've been invisible for 10 years and that bothers him. He'll want to take your measure. He'll be polite, charming, and he'll say something that tests whether you can be managed." Harry thought about this. "And what do I do?" "Whatever you like," Regulus said. "You can't be managed. He'll figure that out or he won't, but he can't do anything about it in the middle of Diagon Alley in front of witnesses." "He might go after the letter," Remus said quietly. "There are people who have been trying to find out where you've been. Lucius has contacts in the ministry. The matter of your legal guardianship has been contested in certain circles." "Contested how?" Sirius said. His voice had gone very level. "There have been attempts to raise the question of whether your suitability," Remus chose his words carefully. "There are people who think Harry should have been raised differently, in a different environment, under ministry oversight." "Under their oversight," Sirius said. "Yes. Have they done anything?" "Nothing actionable. Dumbledore has mostly held the line." A pause. "Whether out of genuine respect for your choices or because he wants to maintain his own access to Harry, I've never been entirely sure." "Does it matter?" Harry asked. All 4 of them looked at him. "I mean," he shrugged. "Whatever his reasons, he hasn't interfered. The result is the same." He looked at Remus. "What's actionable and who would act?" The question was so precisely the right question, asked with such calm practicality, that Remus looked at him for a moment with the particular expression that meant he was recalibrating something upward. "Lucius Malfoy has enough ministry influence to file for a review of your guardianship arrangement," Remus said. "He hasn't done it because he hasn't had enough information about your circumstances to make it stick. Public information about your education, your living conditions, your well-being, all positive and all hard for him to counter." He paused. "Once you're at Hogwarts, he'll have more. He'll see how you've been raised. He'll know if there's anything he can use." "So we make sure there's nothing to use," Hermione said. "We're not performing for Lucius Malfoy," Sirius said. "That's not what I mean," Hermione said, in the tone she used when she was about to explain something patiently. "I mean that Harry genuinely being fine, genuinely being well-prepared and healthy and capable is the best counter to any challenge. We're not pretending, we're just being what we are." She looked at Harry. "And what we are is fine." "More than fine," Harry said. "Considerably more than fine," Hermione agreed. Diagon Alley on a bright July morning was extraordinary. Harry stepped through the Leaky Cauldron into the alley proper and stopped, and Hermione stopped beside him, and they both looked at it, the cobblestones, the tilting shop fronts, the robes and owls and cauldrons, and the particular density of magical life pressing in from every direction, and neither of them spoke for a moment. "Well," Harry said. Yes, Hermione agreed. Behind them, Sirius was already moving with the ease of someone who'd spent half his life in this street. Remus fell into step beside Hermione with the relaxed alertness of someone who was looking at everything without appearing to look at anything. Regulus had arrived separately from a different direction and materialized at Harry's left shoulder so smoothly that it might have seemed accidental to anyone watching. Gringotts first, Sirius said, then wands, then robes, then whatever Hermione puts on the list. I don't have a list, Hermione said. You have 6 lists, Harry said. I watched you make them. Those are prioritized categories, not lists. Robes first, Remus said with the peacemaking timing he'd perfected over a decade. Gringotts will take a while. We don't want to be carrying everything while we're in there. Madame Malkin's was busy. There were 3 other families being fitted when they arrived. A girl with red hair who looked a year or 2 older than Harry and was engaged in a detailed argument with what appeared to be her mother's written instructions. A pair of twins who were using their fitting time to conduct some kind of experiment with pins. And in the far corner, being fitted in spotless new robes with the air of someone enduring a necessary inconvenience, Draco Malfoy. He was blonde and pale and had his father's face in miniature, and he looked at Harry with immediate recognition. The scar was not hidden, Harry had never hidden it, and the recognition was followed by something that tried to be calculation and landed closer to curiosity before Draco got control of it. Potter, Draco said. It was a greeting and a statement simultaneously. Malfoy, Harry said. Same tone, same register, a small pause in which the measuring occurred. I heard you'd vanished, Draco said. He was trying for Lucius's drawl and wasn't quite there yet, too young, the edges still rough. I was around, Harry said pleasantly. He stepped up onto the fitting block next to Draco's and Madame Malkin began taking measurements with her enchanted tape. How are the robes? Draco looked at him, momentarily uncertain whether Harry was being genuine or not. Fine, he said. Good. Harry looked at himself in the mirror as the tape moved around him. Hogwarts in September, obviously. Me too. He glanced over. Do you play Quidditch? Whatever Draco had been preparing for, it hadn't been that. Yes, he said, thrown slightly off his script. Seeker, same, maybe we'll play against each other. A pause. Draco looked at him with the expression of someone reassessing. Maybe. It was not friendship. It was not the beginning of friendship. But it was something different from the hostility that had been prepared for, and Harry had chosen it deliberately, not out of strategy exactly, but out of genuine preference. He would deal with Draco Malfoy as Draco Malfoy, not as Lucius's proxy or a pure-blood symbol, and see what that produced. Hermione, being fitted beside a large mirror 2 positions down, caught his eye in its surface and gave a fractional nod that meant she'd clocked the same thing. Lucius Malfoy arrived 5 minutes later. He was tall, impeccably dressed, his pale hair over one shoulder, carrying a silver-headed cane that Harry recognized from Regulus's descriptions as not merely decorative. He looked at Madame Malkin's crowded shop with the air of a man surveying his own property, and then his eyes found Harry and he stopped. Nothing changed in his face. That was the impressive part, Harry thought, the absolute facial discipline of someone who had spent decades saying one thing and meaning another. But something in the quality of his stillness changed, a recalibration so small that only someone watching for it would catch it. Mr. Potter, Lucius said. He crossed the shop with measured steps and stopped at a courteous distance. What a very pleasant surprise. I don't believe we've met, Lucius Malfoy. He extended his hand. Harry shook it. Firm, brief, unhurried. I know who you are, he said. Regulus mentioned you. The slight shift in Lucius's eyes at Regulus's name was infinitesimal and told Harry a great deal. Regulus Black, Lucius said smoothly. A tragic loss, a talented young man. Wasn't it, Harry said. He stepped off the fitting block done with his measurements. Your son plays Seeker. I was just saying we might face each other at Hogwarts. Indeed. Lucius's gaze moved to the shop entrance, where Sirius was visible through the window talking to someone on the street, and then back to Harry. His expression had settled into something that was professionally warm and entirely closed. You've been raised by Sirius, I understand, and Remus Lupin and someone else you know. Harry picked up his folded robe from the counter. You look well, Mr. Malfoy. I imagine we'll run into each other again. He moved toward the door with the ease of someone who had decided the conversation was over, and the thing about this, the thing that Harry had learned from 10 years of watching Regulus navigate rooms, was that the person who ends the conversation holds it. Lucius Malfoy was not a man accustomed to having conversations ended by 11-year-olds. Hermione fell into step beside Harry on the alley stones outside. Remus materialized from the left. Sirius turned from his conversation and read Harry's face. Lucius, Sirius said, not a question. In the shop he was polite. Harry handed Sirius his bagged robes. He'll be writing letters tonight. To whom? Remus asked. I don't know yet, but he'll want information. He'll want to know what I know and what I can do. Harry looked down the alley thinking, he won't do anything direct. Regulus is right about that, but he'll start moving pieces. He's been moving pieces for 10 years, Sirius said. We're not particularly scared of his pieces. I'm not scared of them at all, Harry said. I'm thinking about them. There was a small beat and then Remus said almost to himself, 10 years ago I was worried you'd grow up angry. Harry looked at him. I did grow up angry. No, Remus said. You grew up clear, that's different. Ollivander's was a narrow, dusty, extraordinary place that smelled of wood shavings and old magic, and Ollivander himself was precisely as unsettling as his reputation suggested, those pale moon eyes that seemed to measure the inside of a person rather than the outside. He looked at Harry for a long moment before saying anything at all. "I wondered," he said finally. "I wondered when you'd come. I knew your parents' wands, of course. Lily's willow 10¼ swishy, excellent for charms. And James' mahogany 11 inches pliable, wonderful for transfiguration." He moved down his shelves, pulling boxes with the automaticity of long habit. "And the one that gave you that scar, I knew that one too, 13½ inches, you, phoenix feather." He turned to look at Harry with those silver eyes. "The phoenix who gave that feather gave only one other. It is curious that you should be destined for the brother wand." "Why curious?" Harry asked. "Because it suggests connection," Ollivander said. "Not destiny, precisely, connection which can be broken." He set a box in front of Harry. "Try this one." 17 boxes later, Harry trying each one with the methodical patience that had characterized his approach to every challenge since he was 7, the right one arrived almost incidentally, a box near the bottom of a pile that Ollivander produced with an expression that suggested he'd known it was there all along. Holly and phoenix feather. 11 inches, supple. Harry picked it up and the warmth ran up his arm and the dust moved and Ollivander exhaled. "Curious," Ollivander said, "very curious." "You said that already," Harry said. "I say it again, the wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. This wand has been waiting." He tilted his head. "I don't think it will wait very long before it's put to significant use." "Probably not," Harry agreed pleasantly. He paid and moved aside for Hermione. Hermione's fitting took considerably less time. She picked up the third wand offered, vine wood, dragon heartstring 10¾ inches, and the light in the shop changed, warm and gold and immediate, and Ollivander looked at her the way he'd looked at Harry except differently, the way you looked at a thing you recognized but hadn't expected to see here. "Remarkable," he said. "Thank you," Hermione said, as though receiving a straightforward compliment. "Vine wood is unusual. It seeks a witch of extraordinary potential, a witch who has a driving need to prove herself, a witch who fears failure." He paused. "I say that not as criticism." "I know," Hermione said. She was looking at the wand. "I'm working on it." Ollivander looked at her. "Yes," he said after a moment. "I believe you are." They ate at the Leaky Cauldron, at a corner table that Regulus had arrived at 20 minutes earlier, and secured in the way he secured most things, quietly in advance with an awareness of all exits. The 5 of them ate shepherd's pie and argued about course selection in the pleasant, directionless way of people who are fundamentally in agreement and are arguing mostly because it's enjoyable. Hermione wanted to take every class. This was not a surprise. Harry wanted to take every class that involved active magic, and none that involved sitting still for long periods, which Remus pointed out was most of them, and Harry said that was a pedagogical problem, and Remus told him that using the word pedagogical correctly wouldn't get him out of history of magic. "We already know history of magic," Harry said. "Regulus taught it to us for 2 years. "Then it'll be easy," Remus said. "That's not the point. Your point," Remus said, "is that you're bored by repetition, which is a reasonable objection and also completely irrelevant because going to school means some repetition and the alternative is not going to school and you are going to school." "I'm not arguing about going," Harry said. "Good, I'm arguing about whether I should be allowed to read ahead." "You're absolutely allowed to read ahead." "She already has," Harry said, gesturing at Hermione. "Of course I have," Hermione said with dignity. Sirius, who had been watching this with visible delight, looked at Regulus across the table. Regulus was cutting his pie with geometric precision. "They're ready," Sirius said quietly. "They've been ready for 2 years," Regulus said. "I know." Sirius looked at them, Harry mid-debate, gesturing with a fork, Hermione countering with the specific index finger point she deployed when she was particularly certain of something. "I mean for the other thing. Being out there," he paused, "handling Lucius today." Harry handled Lucius. Hermione kept account of every person who recognized Harry's scar and mapped their positions relative to any exit. She'll have told him all of this by tonight. He took a measured bite. "They handled it. Are you proud?" Regulus set down his fork. "Don't be sentimental about it." "I'm completely being sentimental about it. Answer the question." A pause. Outside the Leaky Cauldron's small windows, the alley moved and buzzed with late afternoon life. "Inordinately," Regulus said and picked his fork back up. The trouble arrived as they were leaving. Not Lucius, he was gone, presumably with Draco already back at Malfoy Manor composing his letters. It was smaller than Lucius, more immediately unpleasant, the kind of trouble that wears a ministerial badge and smells of bureaucratic certainty. Dolores Umbridge was standing on the alley steps in a cardigan the color of something sick, pink and sour, with a clipboard and a smile that had never been near genuine warmth. She was flanked by 2 ministry officials who had the look of people deployed for administrative rather than tactical purposes. She looked at the group of them, Sirius, Remus, Harry, Hermione, Regulus slightly to the side, and her smile widened. "Mr. Black," she said, "and Mr. Lupin, how nice to see you both." Her eyes traveled to Harry with the practiced assessment of someone who had been briefed. "And Mr. Potter, my goodness, you look just like your father." "Do I?" Harry said. His voice was entirely pleasant. "I'm Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister." She said it with the particular satisfaction of someone for whom the title had become an identity. I've been hoping for an opportunity to meet you. The ministry has had some questions about the unusual nature of your upbringing. Very informal questions, she added with a laugh like something small being crushed. Nothing official. Then you won't mind if we don't stop, Sirius said. He was smiling, but it didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. Oh, just a moment of your time. We have a reservation, Sirius said. They didn't, but the confidence with which he said it turned it retroactively into truth. Mr. Potter. Bridge addressed Harry directly, stepping slightly to the side to intercept the line of movement, in the particular way of institutional authority that knew it couldn't compel and was relying on social friction to achieve what law couldn't. I just want to make sure you're happy. In your home environment, a child of your importance deserves every possible. I'm happy, Harry said. Thank you for asking. And your education has been properly supervised? Yes, by qualified witches and wizards. Yes, she smiled. It did not change her eyes. I'm so glad to hear it. Because there have been some concerns raised, concerns I'm personally sympathetic to, you understand, about whether the ministry ought to have been more involved in. The ministry's involvement in Harry's upbringing is governed by the terms of his legal guardianship, which was established in accordance with his godfather's rights and documented at Gringotts, Hermione said. She stepped forward slightly, not aggressively but with the absolute calm of someone citing a settled matter of record. Any formal challenge would require a full Wisengamot review and would need to demonstrate specific harm. You said you had informal questions. We've answered them informally. Have a lovely afternoon. Umbridge looked at Hermione with an expression that moved through several stages, surprise, reassessment, something that was the first draft of dislike, before settling back into the smile. My, she said, aren't you sharp? Hermione Granger, Hermione said. Yes, there was a beat. Well, Umbridge said, I'm sure we'll meet again. Probably, Harry agreed. Goodbye, Ms. Umbridge. They walked past her, all five of them. Regulus's shoulder brushed hers as he passed, not by accident, and he held her gaze for approximately 2 seconds, long enough to communicate something precise and quiet, and then moved on. On the alley they walked half a block in silence. Then Sirius grabbed Hermione around the shoulders and said, that was the single best use of the word informally I have ever heard in my life. I memorized the relevant guardianship statutes 3 years ago, Hermione said. Of course you did. She'll be a problem, Remus said from behind them. Umbridge, she's been a problem in the ministry for years. She drafts the anti-werewolf legislation. She's not finished with today. She's not finished with today, Harry agreed. But today she didn't get anything. He looked at Hermione. You knew the statutes. Someone had to. I knew them too, for what it's worth, Harry said. I know you did. She looked at him, but I was closer. He smiled. She smiled back. It was Sirius thought, the most 1,400 words of legal statute cited in an alley doorway moment of warmth he'd ever witnessed, and it was entirely characteristic of them. They got back to the cottage after 6. The evening was long and golden, summer at its fullest, and the birch trees threw shadows across the garden that moved in the slight wind. Creature had made dinner and left it warming on the stove and retired, as he often did in the evenings now, with a dignity that had grown considerably over the years of taking care of people who treated him as though his dignity were real. After dinner, Harry went outside. Sirius found him at the garden wall, sitting on it, looking out over the hills, his new wand held loosely in his hand. You're thinking, Sirius said. Bit. Sirius sat on the wall beside him. The hills were going purple and gold. Lucius is going to try to interfere at Hogwarts, Harry said. It wasn't really the first thing on his mind, but it was a real thing, so he led with it. Probably. Umbridge wants ministry oversight. She does. Voldemort isn't gone. A pause. No, Sirius said. He's not. Regulus is getting close on the Horcruxes. I've seen the journal. He looked at Sirius. I've been reading it for 2 years. He knows I have. Sirius looked at him. Yeah. He left it out on purpose. I know. Harry turned the wand over in his hands. I know what's coming, not exactly, but the shape of it. He'll come back, and when he does, it'll be what happened when I was 1, but worse, because this time he'll be angrier, and everyone around us is going to want to use that. Dumbledore, the ministry, the order, or whatever's left of it. He paused. I don't want to be used. You won't be, Sirius said. I won't, Harry agreed. Not with defensiveness, just with certainty, the quiet kind. But I need to be ready, not scared, not hidden, just ready. He looked at the wand. I think Hogwarts is where some of that happens. Some of it already happened, Sirius said. You handled a Malfoy and a ministry official before noon today. That was easy. He said it without arrogance. Lucius was testing whether I could be read and I'm not readable, and Umbridge was doing bureaucratic intimidation, which only works if you let it. He paused. The hard thing will be the thing I can't plan for, whatever comes at Hogwarts that I haven't already thought of. Sirius was quiet for a moment. You know what James would say? Harry looked at him. He'd say you're overthinking it and you should wait until there's actually something to hit. Harry laughed. It was sudden and genuine, the laugh that still caught Sirius off guard sometimes because it was so completely Lily, quick, bright, a little surprised by itself. And then he'd go do something mad, immediately, without preparation, and it would somehow work. 70% of the time. Sirius paused. The other 30%, your mother fixed it. Harry looked back at the hills. Something had settled in him. You could see it in the line of his shoulders, the way he was holding the wand now, not anxiously but naturally, the way you hold something that belongs to you. I miss them, he said simply. I know, Sirius said. Me too. I'm going to finish what he started when he killed them, not because I have to, because I want to. Sirius thought about saying something measured. He thought about saying something about the complexity of revenge versus justice, about making sure Harry understood the difference, about all the careful and responsible things you said to the people you loved before they walked into danger. He put his arm around his godson's shoulders instead. I know, he said, we'll do it together. The sky went dark over the hills. The first stars came out sharp and early the way they always did in Scotland. In the cottage behind them, Regulus was writing. Remus was reading. Hermione was in her room with her lists and her orange notebook, annotating something in the margins with the focused satisfaction of someone already preparing for a world she intended to walk through fully armed. September was coming, Hogwarts was coming, everything was coming, and for the first time in 10 years Sirius thought, let it. Chapter 4, The Castle Unfiltered. The Hogwarts Express left at 11. Harry and Hermione were on the platform at 10:15, which was Hermione's doing, and which Harry had not argued about because experience had taught him that arguing about timing with Hermione was a specific kind of futile. Their trunks were loaded. Their owls, Harry's white Hedwig, Hermione's tawny Crookshanks adjacent barn owl she'd named Ptolemy after reading an astronomy text at age 7, were caged and tolerating the situation with varying degrees of grace. Sirius was on the platform in muggle clothes with his hair pulled back, looking like the most conspicuous person in London, which was an achievement given the robes and pointed hats in his immediate vicinity. Remus stood beside him in his good coat, composed, scanning the platform with the habitual alertness that never fully left him. Regulus was not visible, which meant he was there but had chosen not to be seen, which was his way of being present for things that required discretion. You've got everything, Sirius said for the third time. Yes, Harry said, potions kit in the trunk. Extra parchment, Sirius, Hermione said gently but firmly, the tone she used on all of them when the emotion was running ahead of the practicality. We have everything. Sirius looked at her, then at Harry, then ran a hand through his hair. Right, he said, right, yeah, I know. He pulled Harry in and held on for a moment, and Harry held on back, and then Sirius stepped back and there was something in his face that he wasn't bothering to hide, which was not his usual approach but which Harry understood was the particular tax of this particular morning. Remus hugged Hermione and then Harry and said into Harry's hair very quietly, you know everything you need to know. I know, Harry said. You'll learn things that we haven't covered. I know. Some of them will surprise you, probably. Good. Remus stepped back and looked at him steadily. That's good, let things surprise you. He paused. Right to us. Every week, Hermione said. More than that, Sirius said. Every week, Harry confirmed. Sirius, every week. The train whistle went. Around them the platform surged with last-minute chaos, parents calling, students heaving trunks, owls complaining philosophically about their circumstances. Harry picked up Hedwig's cage and looked back one more time at the three of them standing together on the platform, and the thing that moved through him was not anxiety. It was love, the large and complicated kind, and he held it for exactly a second and then he stepped onto the train. Hermione was already in a compartment 2 cars down, having moved through the crowd with her characteristic purposefulness. Harry settled in across from her, put Hedwig's cage on the rack, sat down. The platform slid away outside the window. He watched Sirius's figure until it was too small to see, and then he watched the city blur past, and then he looked at Hermione. She was reading, of course she was. Which one? He asked. Hogwarts, a history, she said without looking up. I've read it 4 times but I always catch something new. You've had it since you were 8. That's what I said, yes. Harry pulled out his own book, Quidditch Through the Ages, which he'd also had for years but which remained inexhaustibly satisfying, and they sat in companionable quiet while England scrolled past outside. The compartment door opened. A red-haired boy looked in, saw them, took in the fact that there were seats available and general good feeling about the existing occupants. Mind if I sit? Go ahead, Harry said. He sat. He had a smudge of something on his nose and an air of comfortable chaos, the kind that came from being one of several. He looked at Harry and tried, quite visibly, not to stare at the scar. Harry appreciated the effort. Ron Weasley, the boy said, extending a hand. Harry Potter, Hermione Granger. Harry shook the hand. Hermione looked up briefly, assessed, went back to her book. This was not rudeness, it was simply that she was in the middle of a paragraph and she'd engage properly when she'd finished it, which both Harry and Ron understood within about 30 seconds, Ron through instinct and Harry through familiarity. Potter, Ron said. So you're the one with the scar? Yeah. Right. Ron looked at the scar quickly and then away. Sorry, it's fine, I'm used to it. Ron relaxed. Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Harry confirmed. You. 6 brothers, 4 of them went. One of them's a git. He said this with the cheerful ease of settled familial opinion. You'll probably meet him, his name's Percy. The git, Hermione said from behind her book. The very same. Ron looked at her with interest. You've already read Hogwarts, a history? Several times. She lowered the book, regarded him. Ron Weasley, your father works in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office. Ron blinked. Yeah, he does. How did you? I've done quite a lot of background research on wizarding families. Not to be invasive, it's useful context. She paused. He's well regarded, one of the genuinely good people in the ministry from what I've read. Ron looked both flattered and slightly overwhelmed. I'll tell him you said so. You don't have to. No, he'd love it. Harry watched this interaction and thought, yes, good. Ron Weasley had nothing calculated about him, which was in itself interesting to Harry, who had spent 11 years learning to read the calculated things in people. Genuine was its own kind of rare. "You know which house you want?" Harry asked. "Gryffindor," Ron said immediately. "All my family. What about you?" "We'll see what the sorting thinks," Harry said. "I have a theory about the sorting," Hermione said. They both looked at her. "The hat sorts based on values, not abilities. Which means it sorts based on self-perception, what you believe matters most about yourself rather than actual aptitude. Which means people end up in houses that reflect their self-concept, which then shapes how they develop, which is a self-fulfilling system." She paused. "I find it a bit circular, honestly." Ron stared at her. "You worked that out from the books?" "From Hogwarts, a history and some primary sources I found in a genealogical archive." She looked at him. "You think it's too much?" "No, I think it's—" He stopped. "Actually, that sounds about right." He thought about it. "So where does it put you?" "Somewhere it thinks I belong," Hermione said. "Which may or may not be where I actually do. We'll find out." Harry was sorted into Gryffindor. The hat had barely touched his head when it said, with a quality that suggested it was not working particularly hard. Gryffindor, and Harry had stood and walked to the table amid the noise of the hall and sat down and looked back at the line of first years waiting and watched. He watched Hermione's face when the hat took a long time. The pause stretched, longer than his had, longer than Ron's, which had been rapid, longer than most of the first years. Hall went slightly quiet in the particular way halls go quiet when something is holding everyone's attention. The hat sat on Hermione's head and seemed to be engaged in a genuine conversation. Harry couldn't hear it from the table. He didn't need to. He could read Hermione's face. She was listening, her chin lifted slightly, the expression she got during a complex argument where she was genuinely considering the other side. Then something settled in her face. Not submission, resolution. The look of someone who has worked something out. "Gryffindor," the hat called. The table erupted. Harry was already moving over to leave space before she'd even stood up. She sat beside him and he said, "What did it say?" "It said I could be in Ravenclaw or Gryffindor," she said, "and that the choice was mine." "What did you say?" She looked at him. "I said I wanted to be where you were." He held her gaze for a moment and then said, "Good, don't be soppy about it," she said. "I'm not being soppy, you're being soppy." "I'm being appropriately soppy," she said, and that was settled. Professor Quirrell was strange from the first lesson. It wasn't obvious. Harry had grown up learning to read rooms and the people in them, and what he read in Quirrell was not the obvious strangeness of someone performing nervousness, the stutter, the jumpy quality, the particular way he had of not quite meeting anyone's eyes, but something underneath that, a second layer of a completely different texture, like watching someone do an impression of a frightened person who wasn't frightened at all. He said this to Hermione in the library the third week of term. "I noticed it too," she said without looking up from her Transfiguration reading. "The stutter is inconsistent. It drops when he's explaining something he's engaged with and returns when he remembers he's supposed to be stuttering." "Right, and his hands don't shake." "The turban," Harry said. "Yes," she looked up now. "The turban, he says it was a gift from an African prince, but it smells wrong, not wrong like a smell, wrong like a warding." She paused. "Like a concealment charm over something that isn't pleasant." They looked at each other. "Regulus said," Harry started, "not to assume, yes, but he also said to notice when something doesn't fit and keep noticing until it does." She closed her book. "Let's find out where the chamber of restricted access is." "There's no chamber of restricted access." "No, but there's a third-floor corridor that's been locked since September and we've been told not to go there, which is suggestive." She stood. "Not tonight, we need more information." "Obviously not tonight, it's 10:30, I know what time it is." She already had her bag. "Library, then sleep." "You already knew everything in the library." "I knew what was available in the cottage. The Hogwarts library is different." A pause. "And restricted. The restricted section is there are books in there." "That is technically the definition of a restricted section." She gave him the look. He followed her to the library. The months moved through autumn and into winter with the particular speed of a new environment that is continuously interesting. There was something genuinely extraordinary about Hogwarts that Harry hadn't been able to prepare for through reading or description. The sense of being inside a living magical system, the way the castle itself seemed to respond to presence, the history embedded in every stone. He was formidable in class and he didn't hide it. He'd thought briefly on the train coming up that perhaps it would be wise to not immediately demonstrate everything he knew, not for strategy, just to calibrate, to understand the terrain. He'd lasted about one class. Professor McGonagall had said a first-year transfiguration exercise that the class broadly struggled with. Harry had completed it in 4 minutes and spent the remaining time pushing it to a more complex transformation out of curiosity. McGonagall had looked at his desk and then at him and said carefully, "Where did you learn this?" "At home," Harry said. "I can stop if it's disruptive." "It is not disruptive, Mr. Potter." She paused. "What else can you do?" Which was how Harry ended up spending 20 minutes after class demonstrating transfiguration that was, by McGonagall's tight-faced assessment, somewhere around third-year level, while Hermione sat in the front row watching with an expression that said she was taking mental notes. McGonagall said at the end, "You were prepared well." "Yes," Harry said, "we were." She looked at Hermione. "Both of you." "Regulus Black is a very thorough teacher," Hermione said. A pause so brief it might have been a blink. Regulus Black is dead, McGonagall said carefully. People keep saying that, Harry said pleasantly. McGonagall looked at him for a long moment, then she said, extra reading materials will be left at my desk for both of you on Tuesdays, take them. Thank you, Hermione said. Don't thank me, just learn. Quirrell was the ongoing thread through all of it. Harry and Hermione picked at it steadily, unhurriedly, the same way they'd picked at difficult problems since they were 7 from multiple angles without forcing conclusions. They learned about the third-floor corridor not by breaking into it but by watching who else was interested in it. They found out about the three-headed dog by following Filch's odd pattern of nighttime wandering, which led to a door, which led to the smell of animal and the unmistakable ambient magic of something large and alert. It's guarding something, Hermione said. Something Dumbledore's keeping here, Harry said, which means something he wanted somewhere protected but not at Gringotts, or something he moved from Gringotts because Gringotts wasn't safe enough, she thought. There was a break-in at Gringotts in July, same day we were in Diagon Alley. Empty vault, Harry said. I remember Sirius mentioning it. An empty vault that had something in it on the morning of the break-in. She looked at him. I wrote to Regulus about the turban. Harry paused. When, 2 weeks ago, I've been waiting for his response. She pulled a letter from her bag. It arrived this morning. He read it. Regulus's handwriting was small and precise, the letters upright as soldiers. The letter was brief. Regulus's letters always were, but what it said was not brief in its implications. The turban concerns me. If you're correct about the concealment charm, and I believe you probably are, the question is what it conceals rather than why. The obvious answer and the correct answer are frequently the same. Be careful, do not engage directly until you understand what you're dealing with. Write again if anything changes. Also, the Gringotts break-in in July. The vault was listed as belonging to Nicholas Flamel. I've been looking into Flamel for other reasons. If the stone I think it is has been moved to Hogwarts, you need to know what it is and who wants it. Harry folded the letter. A stone, he said. The Philosopher's Stone, Hermione said. I've been researching Nicholas Flamel since October. It makes alchemical sense if she stopped. If someone wanted to come back, if someone needed to restore a body, sustain a weakened form, immortality or something close enough. Voldemort, Harry said. Voldemort, she said. And Quirrell is the vehicle. He thought about this. Not just influenced, more than that. The turban is concealing something about his head. His head, she said slowly. They looked at each other. Not just influenced, Harry said. Inhabited. The conclusion sat between them with the weight of something that had arrived earlier than expected but was not ultimately surprising. They'd both been raised to understand that the war wasn't over, that it was only paused, that the pause would end. They hadn't expected it to end in the first year of Hogwarts, but here it was. We need to tell Dumbledore, Hermione said. We will, Harry said, after we've confirmed it. Harry, after we've confirmed it, he said, because if we tell Dumbledore and we're wrong, we lose credibility, and if we tell Dumbledore and we're right, he'll handle it without us and we won't know what happened or how. I want to know. She looked at him for a moment, then, after we've confirmed it. And then we tell Dumbledore, and then we tell Dumbledore, and we write to Sirius and Regulus. Tonight, she agreed. Confirming it took 3 weeks and one very near miss that Ron Weasley got caught up in despite their best efforts to keep it contained, and which he handled with the specific competent luck of someone who hadn't planned to be in a dangerous situation but found, upon arrival, that he was reasonably good at it. You knew, Ron said afterward, sitting in the common room at midnight with the slightly shell-shocked expression of someone who'd just done something they hadn't been briefed for. You both knew about Quirrell. We suspected, Hermione said. For how long? October, Harry said. Ron looked between them. And you didn't. We were confirming, Hermione said. We don't act on suspicion. There was a possessed teacher walking around, yes, and going to other teachers with a suspicion that turned out to be wrong would have made everything worse, Harry said. We needed to be sure. Ron sat back, processed this. Right, he said. Okay, that's actually fair. A pause. So now what? Now we've confirmed it, Harry said. So we write to Sirius and to Regulus and we tell Dumbledore and we let the adults handle the Quirrell element, but... Ron said because he was learning to hear the unfinished thought. But the stone is what matters, Hermione said. And the stone is protected by a series of enchantments that we've largely worked out, and if Quirrell decides to move for it before Dumbledore acts, we are closer, Harry said simply. They wrote the letters. Dumbledore received his via McGonagall, who passed it on with the look of someone who found themselves revising their assessment of 2 first years upward again and wasn't sure how to feel about it. Sirius's response arrived in 48 hours and contained enough belly-controlled alarm that Hermione read it twice just to count the places where you could see the effort of restraint. Regulus's response arrived in 12 hours and was 4 lines long, the final line of which was, the corridor. Don't go near it alone. If it moves, tell me immediately and wait. They waited. Quirrell moved on a Tuesday in May, which Harry felt was an odd choice, but the possessed tended not to optimize for scheduling. He felt it not a sound exactly, more like a shift in the castle's ambient magic, the way the air changed. He was in the common room and he sat up from his homework and said, tonight. Hermione looked up from her book. Her eyes went sharp. How do you know? The castle's different. Can you feel it? She was quiet for a moment, listening with whatever internal instrument she'd developed for exactly this kind of reading. Yes, she said, you're right. We go, Harry said. We can't wait for Dumbledore to respond to a letter. By the time I know, she was already standing. Ron, she said to where Ron was playing chess in the corner. He looked up, read their faces, folded his board. What do we need? Your chess, Harry said. It's one of the enchantments. Ron's face split into a grin that had nothing to do with safety or sense, and everything to do with the particular delight of someone given a problem they know they can solve. Finally, he said. The corridor was exactly as expected and worse than expected simultaneously, which was the nature of things you'd theorized about but not experienced. The three-headed dog, Fluffy Hagrid, had let the name slip in November, and none of them had mentioned it, was already charmed into sleep by something else, which meant Quirrell had been there ahead of them, which meant they were behind. They moved fast. Harry was good in motion, always had been the kind of good that came from years of flying and Sirius's relentless physical training, the spatial awareness, the ability to be calm while moving through something dangerous. Hermione was good differently, thinking 3 steps ahead while executing the current step without apparent attention. Ron was surprised by his own competence in the chess chamber, which was a genuinely magnificent thing to watch, the frozen certainty of someone who understood the board completely, the clean sacrifice. Go, Ron said from his square. I've got this. Ron, Hermione started. Hermione, it's a board. I speak this language. Go. She looked at him for a moment, and what she gave him was not thanks exactly but the specific respect of one professional for another's domain. You'll need the school infirmary after, she said. I know, go. The mirror room at the end was lit with that particular sourceless light of heavily enchanted spaces. Quirrell was there. And in the mirror, Harry looked at it and understood it immediately in the way that true things sometimes arrive, the reflection not of desire but of will himself, whole and unhurt, pocketing the stone without using it. You want to find the stone but not use it. He felt the warmth in his pocket. Quirrell spun. And at the back of Quirrell's head, beneath the unwound turban, a face Harry had never seen in life but had seen in portraits, and in the particular expression his godfather got when speaking about what he'd lost, a face that was barely a face, white and serpentine and furious. Harry Potter, the thing said. At last. Harry looked at it. He had thought in abstract about this moment, what he'd feel. He'd expected anger, had been prepared for it, had worked for years on what he'd do with it. What he actually felt, looking at the ruined remnant of the thing that had killed his parents and given him his scar and set everything in motion, was clarity. Not cold, clear, the difference between ice and clean water. Not quite what I expected, Harry said. You are, Voldemort said. Give me the stone. No, Harry said. You don't understand what I understand everything about what you are, Harry said. His voice was level. I've been studying you since I was 8. I know what you did and why you did it and what you want. I'm not afraid of you and I'm not giving you anything. He looked at Quirrell, whose face was contorted with the effort of containing 2 things at once. I'm sorry for him, Harry said, and he meant it. I don't know how much of him is left, but what's using him ends now. What happened next was not something Harry planned. He grabbed Quirrell's wrist and the contact, skin to skin, his mother's protection still alive in his blood. The old magic that Regulus had explained to him with careful detail when he was 9 was like holding a live wire, except the current ran outward from Harry rather than through him, and Quirrell's skin beneath his hands was dissolving. He held on. He was strong enough to hold on. Quirrell collapsed. The thing wearing part of his face screamed something that was not a word and came apart, and the room was suddenly very quiet, and Harry was still standing. He stood in the mirror room with the stone in his pocket and the quiet pressing in, and he breathed. Hermione was at his shoulder. He hadn't heard her cross the room. She was looking at the place where Quirrell had been, and her face was very controlled, the exact face she made when she was processing something that was trying to become emotion before she decided how to handle it. Are you hurt? She asked. No, he checked. No, she looked at him. You knew the protection would work. I thought it would. Regulus explained the magic. It was a reasonable theory. You tested it on Voldemort, she said. You tested a theory on Voldemort. It was a good theory. Harry, Hermione. She looked at him for another long moment, and then she turned and picked up his wand from where he dropped it and handed it back to him and said, We need to find Dumbledore, and then we need to write very detailed letters home. Agreed, Harry said, and I'm going to be angry with you about the theory later. Okay, when we're safe, that's fair. They came out of the corridor into the main castle and walked to Dumbledore's office and knocked on the door. And when Dumbledore opened it, he looked at the 2 of them, Harry with his hands slightly reddened, Hermione with her jaw set, both of them steady, and something moved through his expression that was complex and old and possibly, Harry thought, respect. I see, Dumbledore said. Quirrell is dead, Harry said. Voldemort has fled, or whatever he does when the vessel fails. The stone is here. He put it on the desk. Ron Weasley is in the chess chamber and needs medical attention. He's fine, but he needs attention. Dumbledore looked at the stone, at Harry, at Hermione. How long have you known? He asked. October, Hermione said. We confirmed it in April. And you didn't. We wrote to you in May, Harry said. Through Professor McGonagall, you didn't act fast enough. He held Dumbledore's gaze evenly, not accusatory, just factual. We'd rather have waited. We didn't have the option. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Your guardians, he said finally, they prepared you well. Yes, Harry said, they did. He looked at Dumbledore with the particular clarity he'd felt standing in front of Voldemort. We'd like to go home for the summer now. The term isn't, not immediately, Harry said, but when it's over. We'd like to go home, and we'd like the year after that to be unremarkable, and we'd appreciate it if the next dangerous artifact you decided to store at a school full of children was somewhere else." He paused. "Sir," Dumbledore looked at him, and then, genuinely if briefly, he smiled. "I will take that under advisement, Mr. Potter," he said. "Thank you," Harry said. The end of term arrived with summer in its wake, long evenings, and the smell of the Hogwarts grounds going into their warmest months, and Harry and Hermione sat on the train north with Ron across from them, Ron's leg propped on a spare seat with Madame Pomfrey's instructions folded in his pocket, and outside the window England moved past in all its summer green ordinariness. "Next year will be worse," Ron said with the cheerful resignation of someone who had absorbed this reality and decided to live with it. "Probably," Harry agreed. "Definitely," Hermione said. "Cool," Ron said. He leaned his head back. "I'm in." The train moved north, the sun moved west. Harry took out parchment and a quill and started writing his letter home, and he was smiling before he'd finished the first line, thinking of Sirius's face when he read it, the alarm and the pride doing battle, the way they always did, and pride winning the way it always did. Outside the window, England was golden and completely ordinary, and Harry let it be ordinary for exactly as long as the journey lasted. It was, he thought, enough. Chapter 5, What Lives in the Dark. The summer after first year was loud in the way that summers with Sirius always were. He'd received Harry's letter on a Thursday, and by Friday had shown up at King's Cross looking like a man who'd been vibrating at a specific frequency for 3 days straight, which was accurate. He'd read the letter 3 times at the kitchen table with his hands flat on the surface as though he needed the anchor, and then he'd looked at Regulus across the room and said, "He went in there alone." "Not alone," Regulus said without looking up. "Hermione was with him, against Voldemort, against a remnant. There's a distinction." "Reg, I know." Regulus did look up then. "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "The protection held, Lily's magic held. Everything we told him it would do, it did." He paused. "He was right to trust it. He tested a theory on Voldemort," Sirius said. "Yes, he gets that from you." "I would never." Sirius stopped. "That's completely fair." When Harry and Hermione came through the barrier at King's Cross, Sirius's expression moved through about 6 things in rapid succession and landed on something that was relief wearing the clothes of anger, which was how parents expressed both simultaneously. He grabbed Harry first, held him hard, and Harry let himself be held and said, "I'm fine, I'm completely fine." "You are going to tell me everything," Sirius said into his hair. "I already wrote it all down, in person, with your actual voice." "Okay." Remus had Hermione. Not in the same aggressive relief way. Remus's version was quieter, one arm around her shoulders, his head bent toward hers while she talked, him listening with the complete attention he gave things that mattered. Hermione was describing something, Harry could tell from the shape of it, the technical detail in her gestures, and Remus was nodding, and the expression on his face was the one Harry associated with Remus processing something that was trying to be fear after the fact. Regulus was standing by the barrier. He looked at Harry when Sirius finally let go, and what passed between them was not a hug. They'd never been a hug situation, Regulus and Harry. It was more like a nod that contained a significant amount of information, but Regulus put his hand briefly on Harry's shoulder just for a second, and his eyes were doing something complicated. "The mirror," Regulus said. "I understood it immediately," Harry said. "Good, I thought you would." He let go. "We'll talk about the rest later." The rest turned out to be the Horcruxes, presented over 3 evenings in July with all 5 of them at the kitchen table and Creature hovering at the edges in the way he'd developed of being present without being summoned. Regulus laid out everything he knew, all of it finally, without the careful partitioning he'd maintained for years. 2 destroyed, the locket and 1 other. Likely 6 total, possibly more. Objects with significant personal meaning to Voldemort. A ring. A cup. A snake, possibly. Something at Hogwarts, almost certainly. Harry listened to all of it without interrupting, which was unusual for him. Hermione's pen moved steadily. Ron, who had been brought in, "He's in it," Harry had said simply, and nobody had argued, sat across the table with the look of someone whose worldview was expanding faster than comfortable but who was keeping up. "The diary," Hermione said when Regulus finished. All of them looked at her. "Voldemort kept a diary. It was mentioned in 3 of the sources I found in the Hogwarts library, not directly, obliquely, in the context of objects associated with him during the First War." She looked at her notes. "If he made 6 Horcruxes and 2 are already destroyed, and 1 is the ring, 1 is the cup, 1 is potentially the snake, the diary is the remaining one we haven't accounted for. Or it's something else entirely," Regulus said. But he was looking at her the way he looked at genuinely good reasoning, which was with a particular stillness that meant he was taking it seriously. "Where is it?" Harry asked. "That's the question," Hermione said. "I don't know, but it exists, and it's somewhere, and it's going to surface." It surfaced in September. Second year began like first year, but louder, which Harry hadn't thought possible and which turned out to be partly attributable to the presence of Gilderoy Lockhart as defense against the dark arts teacher, an appointment that inspired in Harry and Hermione a shared reaction of such perfectly synchronized disbelief that Ron looked between them and said, "You both made the exact same face." "He's a fraud," Hermione said. "You've known him for 4 minutes," Ron said. "I've read all his books." The spellwork he describes is inconsistent with the results he claims. The magical signatures don't match. The creatures he supposedly defeated used defenses that would render his described methods ineffective. She paused. Also, he's been looking at his own portrait for 30 seconds straight. Okay, Ron said. Fair point on the portrait. Harry was already thinking past Lockhart, which was the correct priority assessment. What was pressing was the other thing, the feeling he'd had twice now, walking certain corridors of the castle, a voice that moved through walls like it was part of them, low and sibilant and cold, a voice that sounded in a way Harry couldn't explain and hadn't told anyone yet, like something he almost understood. He told Hermione on the third night back in the library after hours, quietly enough that the nearest portraits couldn't hear. She put down her quill. You almost understood it. Like hearing a word in a language you know is related to one you speak. The shape of it is familiar. That's not, she thought about it carefully. That's not normal, Harry. I know, Parseltongue. I know. The connection to Voldemort, I know, he said, and his voice was steady, but there was something in it that was less steady than his voice, something he was holding carefully. I've thought about it. Regulus's theory about the scar, that there's something in it, something that transferred the night Voldemort attacked. What if it wasn't just power? What if he left something behind that's more specific than that? Hermione looked at him with the focused intensity of someone fitting pieces together. A piece of him, she said slowly. Not a full Horcrux, not intentional, but the night the killing curse rebounded, if it tore his soul, Harry said, if a piece went somewhere. Into you, she said. He held her gaze. I don't know, but something's here that hears that voice and recognizes it. She was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of someone who didn't know what to say, but the quiet of someone choosing very carefully. You're not him, she said. Whatever is in the scar, whatever it came from, you are not him. I know, Harry said. That's not what worries me. What worries you? That when we figure out how to destroy the rest of the Horcruxes, what we find out is that the last one is me. The library was very quiet. Somewhere in the shelves a book shifted on its own. Then we'll solve that too, Hermione said. When we get there, just like that, just like that. She picked up her quill. We solve things, it's what we do. He looked at her for a moment. She was already writing. The lamp lit her hair and the serious line of her jaw, and he thought, not for the first time, that she was one of the bravest people he'd ever known, and that she would probably argue with that assessment, and that he would let her argue and then keep thinking it. Okay, he said. Good, now help me work out where the basilisk is moving through the castle. He stopped. I'm sorry, the voice you're hearing moves through walls. The petrifications Mrs. Norris last week, which I know you know about, aren't consistent with any conventional curse. The Hogwarts, a history passages on the Chamber of Secrets describe Salazar Slytherin's monster as something that could move through the entire castle unseen. She looked at him. The plumbing is medieval, but the pipe system was expanded in 1437. Something large enough could move through the expanded section. A basilisk, Harry said. A basilisk, she confirmed. Which kills with its gaze, unless seen indirectly, in reflection through a ghost, through something that mediates the direct line of sight. She tapped her pen on the table, which is why the victims have been petrified rather than killed. The basilisk has been seen through something, not directly. Harry thought about this. So as long as nobody sees it directly, they survive. Her voice was carefully controlled. We need to find the chamber. We need to find who's opening it. The diary, Harry. You think the diary is here? I think it surfaced, just like I said it would. I think someone has it and is using it and doesn't understand what it actually is. She looked at him, and I think we're running out of time to find it before someone does see the basilisk directly. The attack on Justin Finch-Fletchley and nearly headless Nick happened on a Wednesday, then Colin Creevy's camera, then in February the worst one, Hermione. Harry found her in the hospital wing already petrified, lying still with that terrible locked quality of something interrupted mid-motion, her hand clenched around a piece of mirror she'd been carrying and the piece of paper in her other hand half torn away. He stood at the foot of her bed for a long time. He didn't cry. He didn't go cold either, the way some people did in crisis. He didn't go anything exactly. He went very, very still, and in the stillness something settled in him with the weight of a decision fully made. He pried the mirror shard out of her rigid hand. Then he opened her other hand carefully and took the half-torn page. It was from a library book, Most Potent Potions, the section on a creature's ability to kill with direct gaze, with a note in Hermione's handwriting so small he needed to hold it close. Pipes, monthly flooding in second-floor girls' bathroom, moves through the school. And at the bottom, her last conscious thought transcribed, it's a rooster, the crow of a rooster kills it. He sat beside her bed and read the page twice, and then he said quietly to the empty space, okay, I've got it from here. He wrote to Sirius and Regulus that night, not asking permission, telling them what he knew and what he was doing. The letter to Regulus was longer, more detailed, the kind of letter you wrote to someone who would receive technical information and understand it completely. Regulus's response came in 36 hours, and it was not short. The Chamber of Secrets is real. Slytherin's monster is a basilisk. Your assessment is correct. The entry point will be controlled by Parseltongue, which is why it's only been accessible by Slytherin's heirs and apparently by you. I should have foreseen this. The connection to Voldemort that gives you the ability to hear it is the same connection that will let you open it. The diary, find the diary. Everything that is happening flows from the diary. Someone is channeling Voldemort through it, a memory preserved in enchanted parchment capable of possessing the holder. Find who has it. The diary will be the immediate problem and destroying it will stop the attacks. How to destroy it? It was made to contain a piece of soul, which means it is essentially a Horcrux. Basilisk venom. Sirius wants to come to Hogwarts and dismantle the chamber with his bare hands. I've told him to wait, right back when you know who has the diary. The rooster, smart, make sure you have one before you go in. The diary arrived at Harry through the most indirect route possible, Ginny Weasley. He'd suspected Ginny for weeks, in the uncomfortable and specific way you suspected someone when the evidence pointed at them, but the conclusion was one you didn't want to reach. She was 12 and she was Ron's sister, and she'd been at the edge of too many incidents with the blank-eyed quality of someone who'd been somewhere else. He talked to Ron. Ron sat with this information in a way that was physically visible. You could see the weight of it pressing him down, the specific loyalty of someone who loved a person and had to accept something terrible about their situation simultaneously. She didn't know, Harry said. Whatever the diary was doing to her, she didn't know. I know she didn't know, Ron said. His voice was rough. But she's got it, or had it. He looked at Harry. Where is it now? She gave it away. The diary told her to. I think it was trying to get rid of the evidence. He looked at his hands. Someone took it from her, and I think that someone is who opened the chamber. Not Ginny, not Ginny. The memory in the diary. It's been working through her, making her open the chamber, direct the basilisk, but the memory is what's intelligent. The memory is Voldemort. Tom Riddle, Ron said. She wrote to me about him months ago, said she'd been writing in a diary and got a reply. His jaw tightened. I should have. You didn't know, Harry said. I should have listened. Ron, he held his gaze. You couldn't have known. Now you do, and now we fix it. He paused. I need to get into the chamber. I'm coming, Ron said immediately, obviously. And Hermione would say find the diary first and destroy it before going in, because eliminating the controlling intelligence removes the directive to attack. But Ginny is in the chamber because the memory dragged her there to drain her life into itself, and if we wait to find the diary she might not have time. He looked at Ron. So we go in and we deal with what we find. Right, Ron said. How do we get in? Second floor girls' bathroom, Harry said. And I need a rooster. The chamber was below the school in a way that felt ancient and deliberate, the architecture of someone who'd wanted something secret to last forever. Harry moved through it with a torch and his wand, and the complete absence of hesitation that came not from fearlessness exactly, but from having committed fully to the decision and having no remaining energy for second thoughts. Ginny was on the floor at the chamber's end, cold and pale, and Tom Riddle was standing over her holding Harry's wand. He'd taken it so smoothly in the entry corridor that Harry hadn't felt it go, and looking at Harry with Voldemort's eyes in a 16-year-old face. You're going to die in here, Harry Potter, Tom Riddle said. He had a quality of certainty that was entirely different from Voldemort's remnant in the mirror room that had been a damaged, desperate thing. This was whole, composed. 60 years of a preserved memory that had been feeding on Ginny Weasley and was now nearly corporeal. You're a diary, Harry said. I've found worse. Riddle's eyes narrowed. You're not afraid. I spent 2 years reading everything Regulus Black documented about you. I know what you are, I know what you want, and I know your weaknesses. Harry looked at Ginny. She's not dead, not yet. Then we end this before that changes. He looked around the chamber, the stone serpents, the towering statue of Slytherin, the basilisk somewhere in the dark of the pipes above. I need to speak Parseltongue at the diary to close the chamber and stop the basilisk. I need to get Ginny out, and I need to destroy you. He looked at Riddle. I have one between us and a basilisk somewhere above my head, so I'm going to be creative. Riddle smiled. It had none of the warmth a smile was supposed to contain. I'm going to let the basilisk out, Harry said. Riddle stopped smiling. Harry closed his eyes, and in the Parseltongue that lived in his blood like a borrowed gift, he spoke. He didn't call the basilisk toward himself, he called it toward the statue. And then he did something Hermione had spent 3 months teaching him, a light charm, specifically the most intense photokinetic burst in his repertoire, the kind of concentrated magical light that she'd argued theoretically could serve as an emergency substitute for a mirror's redirected gaze. He'd tested it on a candle. He'd never tested it on a 100-foot basilisk. He said later to everyone who asked that it was a reasonable theory. The burst of light hit the chamber at maximum intensity, bouncing off every reflective stone surface simultaneously, catching the basilisk's gaze in its own ambient reflection from every angle. It didn't kill it. The light wasn't sunlight, wasn't a rooster's crow, but it blinded it, the eyes going white and the great head swinging with a sound that vibrated in the floor. Harry had the diary in 3 steps and the basilisk fang he'd pulled from the statue's base in the same motion. Regulus's letter had said basilisk venom, and where there was a basilisk there were fangs, and the statue's broken base had one long and curved and perfectly present, and he drove it through the diary. Tom Riddle screamed. The chamber filled with black ink like a wound. The memory writhed, came apart, the handsome 16-year-old face dissolving from the edges, and somewhere above them the blind basilisk hit a wall and lay still, hurt and confused, and Ginny gasped and sat up. Harry was already beside her. Can you move? He asked. Yes, I think. Up, he said, and helped her. She was cold and shaking, and her eyes were trying to catch up with a room she didn't fully remember entering. We're getting out. Don't look at the basilisk. They just don't look at it. He got her out. He got them both out, up through the pipes and the flooded bathroom, and into the corridor where Ron was waiting with the particular expression of someone who had been listening to extraordinary sounds from below and had maintained position through sheer force of will. Ron looked at his sister. The relief on his face was complete and unglamorous, the real thing, and he grabbed her and held on, and she held on back, and Harry stood in the corridor and let them have that. He was bleeding, he realized. The fang had been longer than he'd thought, and the tip had caught his forearm when he'd stabbed through the diary. Not deep, it strung. He bound it with a basic charm and thought about the letter he'd be writing tonight. Dumbledore's office afterward had the quality of a room that understood it was witnessing something significant. Fawkes was there. The Phoenix had arrived in the chamber somewhere in the chaos, and its tears had done something to the fang wound that closed it faster than any charm, and Dumbledore sat behind his desk and looked at the destroyed diary, and then at Harry with an expression that had moved past recalibration into something more personal. A basilisk fang, Dumbledore said. It was present, Harry said. The diary is destroyed. Yes, which is, Dumbledore paused. Harry, do you understand what the diary was? A Horcrux, Harry said. Not a perfect one, it could interact, possess, develop, more sophisticated than a standard soul container, but yes, a Horcrux. Dumbledore was very still. Who told you about Horcruxes? Regulus Black. The name landed in the office with weight. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted, not the pleasant, managed shift of a man choosing his words, but the unguarded shift of a man genuinely surprised. Regulus Black is dead, Dumbledore said carefully. People keep saying that, Harry said. It keeps not being true. He's alive. He's been alive since 1979. He faked his death, retrieved the locket Horcrux from the cave, and has been working on destroying them for 12 years. He destroyed 2 before I was born. We just destroyed the 3rd. He looked at Dumbledore steadily. You've been working on this problem alone because you thought you were the only one who knew. You're not. Dumbledore took his glasses off. He did something with them that was not quite cleaning them. It was the gesture of a man who needed a moment to think without anyone reading his face. I see, he said. You're going to want to meet him, Harry said, and I think he'll agree to it. But on his terms and mine, and with Sirius and Remus present. He paused. We're not pieces in your game, Professor. We're people who want the same thing you want. We can do this together or separately, but together is faster. You're 12 years old, Dumbledore said, not dismissively, something that was closer to wonder actually. 12 years old and correct, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment, then he put his glasses back on. Tell Regulus Black, he said, that I would welcome a conversation at his convenience. Harry wrote home that night. He told them everything, the chamber, the diary, Ginny, the basilisk, the Horcrux, the conversation with Dumbledore. He wrote Regulus's letter first and longest, then Sirius's, which was shorter because there were things in it that he needed Sirius to receive without the technical detail in the way. I used a basilisk fang and a light charm and a theory, he wrote. I'm fine. I want you to know I wasn't scared, not because I was trying to be brave, there just wasn't room for it with everything else I needed to think about. Is that strange? Tell Remus I understood the parcel tongue better this time, and tell him I thought about what he said, that I'd let things surprise me. I did. The chamber surprised me, not in a bad way, in the way where you find out what you're actually made of. I think I'm made of okay things. Come get us in June. Hermione will be fine by then. Madame Pomfrey says a week, maybe less. Ron is already bragging about the chest to everyone who'll listen. I'm not stopping him because he deserves to brag. Love, Harry. He sealed it and sent Hedwig out into the night and sat on his window ledge watching her go, white in the dark, smaller and smaller, until she was just a point of light among points of light and then gone. In the hospital wing below, Hermione was still petrified, still locked in that terrible stillness, the piece of mirror still leaving a faint impression on her palm even after Harry had taken it. He'd sat with her 3 times this week, talking not about the chamber, just talking about nothing and everything, about the things they do over summer, about Ron's increasingly elaborate chess analysis, about the letter Regulus would write when he found out about the basilisk fang theory and whether it would contain the word inadvisable. She couldn't hear him, probably, but it felt important to be there anyway. He went back to the hospital wing now and sat in the chair beside her bed and put his elbows on his knees and looked at her still locked face. I destroyed the 3rd one, he said quietly. Basilisk fang. Regulus is going to write that it was inadvisable and he's going to be right technically, but it worked and you would have done the same thing. He paused. Maybe not the basilisk fang from the statue's base bit. You'd have had actual preparation. You'd have had 3 plans and a fallback. He looked at his hands. I told Dumbledore about Regulus. I hope that was right. I think it was right. We need to move faster now, and we can't move faster if everyone's working separately. He thought about the Horcrux that might be in the scar. He hadn't told Regulus that theory yet. He was still working out how. The diary surprised me, he said to Hermione's still face. Not what it was that matched the theory, but how it felt, fighting a memory. Fighting something that was never quite alive and isn't quite dead. He paused. It said I was going to die in there, and I thought the thought that I had right then was, not today, just that, not today. He was quiet for a moment. I think that's a good thought, he said, as thoughts go. Madame Pomfrey came in at 9 and told him visiting hours were finished, which they technically had been for 2 hours, and he went back to Gryffindor Tower and slept without dreaming, which was the best kind of sleep. 3 days later, Hermione came out of it. Harry was in transfiguration when Ron appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone about to deliver news that was extremely good. Harry was out of his seat before Professor McGonagall had finished the word Potter, which drew a sharp look that softened immediately when Ron delivered the one-word message. "She's awake." Harry walked into the hospital wing and Hermione was sitting up in bed with her hair at its absolute worst and her face showing the signs of the medically dramatic 3 months she'd missed, and she looked at him with those ancient brown eyes and said, before anything else, "The basilisk. Did you handled?" Harry said. "The diary destroyed. The fang I left you notes about the venom used one," Harry said. "From the statue." She stared at him. "You improvised. Efficiently." Harry, Hermione. She looked at him for a long moment, and then something in her face went very briefly undone, just for a second, the way it went when something had been held at distance and then stopped needing to be, and she reached out and grabbed his hand and held it, and he held back, and neither of them said anything for a while. "You were worried," he said. "I was petrified. I wasn't worried. I was unconscious. Before that." A pause. "Yes," she said. "Before that. I know." He squeezed her hand once and let go. "It's handled. Write to Regulus and get his actual opinion because you'll want it properly." She was already looking for her notebook. "Hermione," he said. She looked up. "I'm glad you're back," he said. She held his gaze. "I'm glad you didn't die in a chamber while I wasn't there to stop you doing something theoretically inadvisable." "That's almost soppy," he said. "Don't push it," she said, and found her notebook. He laughed, and it was the right sound for the room, and everything settled back into the shape it was supposed to be. Chapter 6. The truth about everything. The meeting between Regulus Black and Albus Dumbledore happened on a Thursday in August, in the cottage garden, with all 5 of them present and Creature watching from the kitchen window, with the expression of someone prepared to intervene in ways that would be difficult to explain. Dumbledore arrived at the blue door at precisely 2 o'clock. Harry had thought about this. Dumbledore's punctuality was a form of courtesy and a form of control simultaneously, the message being that he respected the meeting enough to be exactly on time, and that being exactly on time was something he could choose. Harry noted it and said nothing. Sirius opened the door. The 2 of them looked at each other on the step, and whatever passed between them was old and complicated, in the way of people who had been on the same side and crossed purposes and lost things in the same war, and never fully resolved any of it. Sirius stepped back and let him in. Regulus was in the garden. He'd chosen to be outside rather than inside, which Harry understood as a tactical decision. Open ground, multiple exit points, the psychological advantage of being the one already present in a space when the other person arrived. He was standing beside the stone wall with his arms folded, and his face doing the composed thing it did when he was being most careful. He looked, Harry thought, nothing like a dead man. He looked like someone who had been conserving himself for a long time and had recently decided to stop. Dumbledore stepped into the garden and looked at Regulus for a long moment. "Regulus," he said. "Albus," Regulus said. Another silence, the second kind, not the awkward kind, but the kind where 2 intelligent people are simultaneously processing the fact that they're in the same space and recalibrating their understanding of events accordingly. "You've been working on this since 1979, Dumbledore said. "Since I understood what he'd done, yes. Alone, largely." Regulus glanced briefly at Harry and Hermione, who were sitting on the garden bench with the studied casualness of people pretending not to follow every word. "More recently, not." Dumbledore followed the glance. He looked at Harry with that particular expression he'd been developing, the one that had started as assessment and was evolving into something Harry couldn't quite name, something that had more respect in it than the expression of a man managing an asset. "The diary was the 3rd, Dumbledore said. "The 4th, Regulus said. "The locket first in 1979, a ring in 1981. I found it at the Gaunt Shack in March, destroyed it before Voldemort's fall." He paused. "Destruction of the ring had a cost I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't clean. The curse," Dumbledore said. Something shifted in his face. "There's a curse on the ring, a death curse. He stopped. "I found it 2 years ago. I wasn't aware you'd already." "I destroyed the stone, but the ring itself is still dangerous," Regulus said. "If you've touched it." "I haven't yet. I've been studying it." Dumbledore looked at his right hand briefly, then at Regulus. "You knew about the stone." "I suspected the Peveril crest. I didn't know what the stone did exactly, only that it was significant to him." Regulus unfolded his arms. "Don't touch the ring, Albus. The curse in it is specifically designed to punish whoever destroys it. I found a containment method, but the ring needs to be destroyed in sequence with the containment or the curse jumps to the destroyer." "How long did you carry it?" Dumbledore asked. A pause. "Long enough." The garden was very quiet. A bird in the birch trees said something brief and went silent. "The remaining ones," Dumbledore said. "You have a theory." "I have more than a theory." Regulus moved to the garden table and opened the journal, the star book, lying there in the summer light, years of careful dark work exposed to the afternoon. A cup belonging to Helga Hufflepuff, currently in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. A locket of Slytherin's. I destroyed the original, but I've reason to believe he made a second, or that I was wrong about which object he used. Something at Hogwarts, something of Ravenclaw's, or something he took from the school. I haven't confirmed which. He turned pages. And the snake. Nagini, Dumbledore said quietly. You know about the snake. I suspected the bond between them. It's not merely affection. She's something more. He looked at the journal. You've been thorough. I've had 12 years. Regulus said it without bitterness. And there's one more possibility that I haven't. He stopped. His eyes went to Harry. Harry met his gaze steadily. Say it. Regulus looked at him. The night Voldemort attacked you, the killing curse rebounded. A curse that powerful redirected doesn't simply disappear, it needs somewhere to go. The force of it destroyed his body, but the soul fragment it carried went into the scar, Harry said. The garden went very still. Sirius, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and the careful neutrality of someone holding a great deal in, said very quietly, How long have you known? Since second year, Harry said. I worked it out properly after the chamber. The parcel tongue, I shouldn't be able to speak it. It's not an inherited ability, it's not something you learn. The only way I have it is if something of Voldemort's is in me. He looked at Regulus. You've thought about this since before I did. Since you were 8, Regulus said, and I didn't know how to tell you. You've been protecting me from it, Harry said. I've been. Regulus stopped. Yes, that's not like you. No, a pause, it's not. Harry looked at him at the particular tension in his uncle's face that he'd been cataloguing for years without quite understanding its source, and now he understood it, and the understanding was not comfortable, but it was clear. You thought it meant I had to die, Harry said. The word die sat in the garden air, and everyone in the space responded to it differently. Sirius's hands went flat against the wall. Remus closed his eyes briefly. Ron looked at Harry with an expression of someone who was learning something he'd rather not know, and Regulus held Harry's gaze without flinching. I thought it was a possibility, Regulus said. That destroying the Horcrux inside you might require dying, Harry said. Yes. And you didn't tell me because you were 8, Regulus said, and his voice was, for the first time in Harry's memory, not composed. Not falling apart. Regulus didn't fall apart, but present, the actual thing rather than the managed version. You were 8 years old and you asked me once if you could borrow the star book and you had ink on your nose and I thought. He stopped. What? Harry said. I thought it was unconscionable, Regulus said. Telling a child they might have to die to fix a war they didn't start. He looked away toward the birch trees. I know that was a choice. I know you'll say you deserve to know. I did deserve to know, Harry said. Yes, but I understand why you didn't. He did. He understood it completely, with the particular understanding of someone who'd spent years watching a man learn to love people and discover how frightening that was. Reg. He waited until Regulus looked at him. We're going to solve it. Harry, we've solved 4 Horcruxes, a possessed teacher, a basilisk, and Tom Riddle's memory, Harry said. We're not solving this one by having me die. That's not the solution. He paused. That's not the solution, and you know it because you've been looking for another one for 4 years. Regulus was very still. Haven't you? Harry said. A long pause, then quietly. There's a theory, incomplete. It involves the original enchantment your mother used, the love protection, the blood magic. If the Horcrux in your scar is essentially a parasite living inside a host body that's been fundamentally warded against Voldemort's magic by Lily's sacrifice, then the ward and the Horcrux are in conflict, Hermione said from the bench. Both Regulus and Dumbledore turned to her. She had her notebook out and was writing. They've been in conflict for 11 years. The ward is Lily's magic, specifically keyed to Harry's blood, which means the Horcrux is living inside something that is continuously hostile to it at a fundamental level. She looked up, which means it's degrading. Slowly, Regulus said, very slowly. But yes, how slowly? Harry asked. Without additional factors, years, decades. He turned back to Dumbledore. With additional factors, it could be accelerated. What factors? Remus asked. He was standing now very straight, his voice completely controlled in the way that meant he was being most careful. The destruction of the other Horcruxes weakens him at a soul level, Regulus said. Every piece destroyed degrades the whole. If we destroy all the others before he regains a body, the fragment in Harry's scar will be diminished, small enough that the ward can contain it fully and ultimately expel it. How confident are you? Sirius said. He was looking at his brother with the directness of someone who needed the truth without the softening. 70%, Regulus said, and the other 30. The other 30 is the variable I can't control, Regulus said, which is whether Voldemort's return accelerates the Horcrux's activity before we've destroyed enough of the others. If he comes back and the scar fragment revives, then we'll have different math, Harry said, but we're not at that problem yet. The math we have now says we destroy the others, we weaken the fragment, we use the ward to handle the rest. He looked at Dumbledore, which is why we need to work together. Gringotts the Hufflepuff cup, that's not a break-in 2 12-year-olds can manage alone. You're 13, Ron said. In October, Harry said. The point stands. Dumbledore had been listening to all of this with the particular quality of attention he brought to things that reconfigured his understanding. He looked at Regulus's journal, then at Hermione's notebook, then at Harry. You've been building toward this moment for 4 years, Dumbledore said, and it wasn't quite clear whether he was addressing Harry or Regulus or all of them. 12, Regulus said. I've been building toward this for 12 years. I owe you an apology, Dumbledore said. For which part? For not looking harder. For accepting the story of your death because it was convenient. For working alone when there were people, he paused. For deciding in my arrogance that no one else could be trusted with the full picture. We've all made that mistake, Remus said quietly. Some of us made it longer than others, Dumbledore said, and he said it with a self-awareness that Harry found genuinely surprising, not the managed humility of a man performing it, but the real kind, which cost something to produce. Regulus looked at him for a moment. Then he turned the journal around on the table and pushed it toward Dumbledore. Read from page 43, that's where the Horcrux theory becomes comprehensive. He sat down. I'll answer questions. The afternoon stretched long and warm around them. Creature brought tea, which nobody had asked for and everyone needed. Ron got pulled into a conversation with Remus about the chess chamber that became, without anyone planning it, a proper debrief, Remus asking questions with the methodical completeness of someone creating a record, Ron answering with increasing confidence, the thing that had happened to him last year being taken seriously rather than sidelined. Sirius sat next to Harry on the bench after a while with the ease of long habit. How are you? Sirius said. Good, Harry said. Then honestly, mostly good. The Horcrux thing, I've known for a year, Harry said. I've had time to sit with it. I haven't, Sirius said. Harry looked at him. Sirius was staring at the garden table where Dumbledore and Regulus were going through the journal together with an expression that was trying to be neutral and wasn't quite getting there. It's not going to end that way, Harry said. I believe Regulus's math, 70%. 70% is good math for something this complicated. He paused. And I'm not going to stand still and wait to be the last Horcrux. We're going to destroy the others and we're going to fix the scar and we're going to finish this. He said it with the same quality he'd had in the chamber, not bravado, not performance, just the clean, factual certainty of someone who has looked at a problem and decided it's solvable. And then it'll be over, and you'll be insufferable about it forever. Insufferable how? Sirius said, and his voice had recovered. Telling everyone, writing it down, making Creature do a commemorative embroidery. That's a wonderful idea, Sirius said. I'm doing that. Regulus will hate it. He'll pretend to hate it, Sirius said. There's a difference. He looked at Harry sideways. He loves you, you know. He doesn't say it because he's Regulus, but he's been living every day of the last 2 years with the possibility that you might. He stopped. That's not easy to do while loving someone. I know, Harry said. Tell him I know. Tell him yourself. I will, later. He watched Regulus turn a journal page for Dumbledore with the patient precision of a man who had been waiting to share this work for a very long time. He looks different, doesn't he, right now? Sirius looked. Yeah, he said. He looks like he put something down. The sun was moving toward the hills when Peter Pettigrew made his appearance, which was not planned by anyone and handled by everyone with the particular efficiency of a group of people who had been thinking about this moment for 12 years. He arrived the way rats do, through a gap no one had noticed, materialized in the kitchen where Creature was washing cups, and was identified by Creature with a single high, ancient alarm sound that brought every person in the building and garden moving at once. Peter was small and damp-looking, which was how he'd always been, Harry thought, seeing him for the first time small and damp-looking, perpetually frightened in the specific way of someone who knew they deserved to be frightened. He was in his human form and he had a wand Harry didn't recognize, and his eyes were moving rapidly between all the people appearing in the kitchen doorway with the trapped quality of something that knows every exit is covered. Peter, Sirius said. The name from Sirius's mouth was not loud, that was the thing. Harry had expected loud 12 years of grief and betrayal and Azkaban and the loss of James and Lily, 12 years of waiting for this, surely it would be loud, but Sirius said it very quietly and that was worse. That was the thing that made Peter's face go grey. Sirius, Peter said, his voice had a tremor in it. Sirius, listen, I can explain. I don't want an explanation, Sirius said. He stepped into the kitchen. I want you to hold still. Peter looked at the others. Remus's face was the controlled, careful nothing that meant he was managing something very large. Regulus was standing to the left of the door with his wand out and his expression entirely clear, not angry, not satisfied, just present, the face of someone completing a task. Dumbledore stood in the garden doorway with the quality of a man who understood he was witnessing something that predated his involvement and required his restraint. Harry and Hermione were in the hall. Ron was beside them, his face showing the particular complicated thing it showed when he was confronting something that had touched his family. Scabbers had been his rat, Scabbers had been Pettigrew, Pettigrew had been in his home for years. The expression on Ron's face was not grief exactly. It was a kind of deep, retroactive revulsion. Peter's eyes found Harry and something moved through them. Harry, Peter said. Harry, are your parents? I never meant. I was so frightened. They would have killed me. You have to understand. I understand perfectly, Harry said. His voice was completely level. You were a coward and you valued your own life over theirs and over everyone else's. I understand that very clearly. He paused. That's not forgiveness. It's just comprehension. Peter looked at him with the expression of a man who'd hoped for something and been denied it and knew he deserved the denial. I don't want to hurt anyone now, Peter said. His voice was very small. I've been running. He's going to come back, and when he does he'll know I've been. I just needed somewhere to go. I just needed. You needed, Sirius said. That's always been your problem, Peter. You always needed something and you always found someone to take it from. He stepped closer. Peter didn't back away, which surprised Harry slightly. I'm not going to hurt you. Peter blinked. I'm going to give you to the ministry, Sirius said. You're going to confess everything, Lily, James, all of it, on record in front of witnesses, including Dumbledore, and I'm going to be cleared. He held Peter's gaze with the steady certainty of someone who has decided on justice rather than revenge and finds justice in the end more satisfying. And then you're going to Azkaban, which is considerably better than what you deserve. The Ministry will, Peter started. Dumbledore will oversee it personally, Regulus said from the doorway, and Sirius has enough documentation of his own innocence that any challenge to the proceedings will fail. He looked at Pettigrew with the flat attention of someone who has moved past the personal into the procedural. You don't have a play here, Peter, you never did. Peter looked at the floor, his shoulders came down. I'm sorry, he said. I know that it doesn't, Sirius said, but say it to Dumbledore. All of it and then we're done. The confession took 2 hours. Dumbledore cast a memory preservation charm on the proceedings, everything recorded, everything sealed against later tampering. Peter talked and the room listened, and Harry sat in the hallway and heard his parents' last months described in the flat, precise voice of someone who had been there and knew every detail and had carried it alone for 12 years. He listened because he needed to. Because it was the truth, and the truth about your parents' death was yours to know however it arrived. Hermione sat beside him. At some point during the second hour she put her hand over his and left it there, and he turned his palm up and held it. Ron was on his other side, not touching, that wasn't Ron's way, but present, shoulder close, the warmth of someone who understood that being there was the thing. When it was finished, Dumbledore sealed the memory in a vial and looked at the room and said, I'll take this to Cornelius Fudge tonight. I believe we can have a formal hearing within the week. He'll resist, Remus said. He'll try, Dumbledore agreed. He won't succeed, the evidence is irrefutable. He looked at Sirius. You should have been cleared 12 years ago. I am sorry that you weren't. Sirius looked at him for a long moment. Get it done, he said. That's the apology I want. Dumbledore nodded. He picked up the vial. He looked around the room, at Regulus's journal still open on the table, at Harry and Hermione in the hallway, at Remus by the window, at Ron, at Peter sitting in the corner with the deflated look of a man whose running days were finished, and something in his expression was very old and very tired, and underneath both of those things something that looked like relief. You built something remarkable here, he said. He wasn't addressing anyone in particular. The room, maybe. I didn't see it because I wasn't looking. He paused. I'll look now. He left with Peter and the sealed memory, and the kitchen had the particular quality of a space that had been through something and was now breathing again. Sirius sat at the table. Remus sat next to him. Nobody said anything for a while. Then Sirius said, That's it then. Not yet, Regulus said. There are still 3 Horcruxes. I know. I meant, Sirius looked at the empty corner where Peter had been. That part, that's done. Yes, Remus said. That part is done. Sirius looked at his hands. Harry watched his godfather do the thing that grief required, a quiet accounting, a private transaction between the present and the past. He didn't intrude on it. He'd learned from Remus that some things needed space more than they needed company. After a few minutes, Sirius looked up. His eyes were dry and his face was different in a way that was going to take Harry a while to map, lighter in some places, heavier in others, the architecture of 12 years of specific anguish rearranging itself now that the cause had been addressed. Right, Sirius said. He looked at Harry. You're going back to Hogwarts in September. Yes, Harry said. New defense teacher, hopefully human this time. That's a low bar, Hermione said from the doorway. After the last 2 years, I'll take it. Sirius looked at Regulus. You're meeting with Dumbledore again, to plan the Gringotts operation, Regulus said, and to work out the Ravenclaw object. Yes, and I'm coming this time. Regulus looked at him. You're still technically, I'll be cleared within the week, you said so yourself. Sirius met his brother's eyes. I'm done sitting in cottages while everyone else does the work. Regulus looked at him for a long moment. Something passed between them that was brothers and history and 12 years and everything that had been said and unsaid and forgiven and held, and the slow, unglamorous work of becoming family again after everything. Fine, Regulus said. Don't touch anything in the vault without asking me first. When have I ever? Constantly, Remus said. Constantly and without remorse. The evening came in slowly around the cottage. Creature made dinner with the particular intensity he brought to significant occasions, which suggested he understood that something had shifted today. He put extra of everything on the table and stood back with his arms folded and his ancient face carrying, very quietly, something that was satisfaction. They ate. All 5 of them at the table, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Sirius, Remus, with Regulus at the end doing the thing where he ate with one hand and wrote in the journal with the other, which everyone had stopped commenting on years ago. Ron told the story of Scabbers from the beginning, once he'd had enough dinner to be philosophical about it, the whole history of the rat who'd been his brother Percy's, and then his, and who had turned out retroactively to be the man responsible for Harry's parents' death, and he told it with the particular dark humor of someone processing a terrible thing by making it briefly absurd. He bit Goyle's finger in 2nd year, Ron said. He never bit anyone else, just Goyle. I always thought Scabbers was showing good judgment, and it turns out it was just, he made a gesture. I don't know what it was, rat instincts, villain instincts, something. Rats bite people who frighten them, Hermione said. Goyle probably stepped on him. That's the least magical explanation possible. Most things are less magical than they seem, she said. You say that and you can levitate things with your brain. Those 2 things aren't in conflict, she said patiently. Harry watched them across the table and thought about the Hogwarts Express in September and the three of them in the compartment, and Ron's open face and how much had fit into the 2 years since. He thought about the Horcruxes and the math and the 70% and his scar and the thing Regulus was still looking for in the margins of the problem, the way out that didn't cost what the obvious way out cost. He thought about his parents. He thought about them the way he'd learned to, not as absence, not as the shape of something missing, but as presence, the kind that didn't require them to be physically in the room. James, who made up for with action what he lacked in forethought. Lily, who built wards that lasted 12 years and reached out of death and protected her son from a fragment of the darkest soul alive. He thought, I'm doing okay, I think I'm doing okay. After dinner in the long golden evening light, Harry went outside and sat on the garden wall, and Sirius came out and sat beside him exactly the way he had the summer before Hogwarts. And the hills were the same hills and the birch trees were the same birch trees, and yet everything was different in the specific way that things were different when the ground under them had shifted. Cleared by the end of the week, Harry said. If Dumbledore is as good as his word, Sirius said. Which I think he might actually be. And then what for you? Sirius leaned on his knees. Help Regulus with the Horcruxes properly, not from the sidelines. He paused. Buy a better house. Grimmauld Place is going to need to become something, a base, somewhere the Order can work from when it needs to. He looked at the hills. Your third year is going to be different. Different how? New teacher, someone good this time. Sirius smiled sideways. Remus applied. Harry turned to look at him. Remus applied for defense against the dark arts. Dumbledore asked him. Actually, Remus said yes. Sirius watched Harry process this. He'll be extraordinary. I know he will, Harry said. But he thought about the monthly absences, the tired, careful management of something that the wizarding world had decided was shameful. He'll have to manage he knows that. Sirius looked at the hills again. He said he'd rather do it than not. He said. He paused and something in his face went briefly open. He said he wanted to teach you properly, in the room with all of you, not just at the kitchen table. He stopped. He cried a bit when Dumbledore asked him. He'll kill me for telling you that. I won't tell him you told me, Harry said. He'll know anyway, he always knows. They sat in the quiet for a while. From inside came Hermione's voice asking Regulus a specific question about Horcrux creation methodology, and Regulus answering with the particular engaged precision he only used when the question was good enough, and Ron saying something that made everyone at the table laugh and Creature moving in the background with cups. Sirius, Harry said. Yeah, thank you, he said it looking at the hills. For Godric's Hollow, for picking me up. Sirius was very still beside him. And for Hermione, Harry said, for not leaving her in that house. He thought about what the other version of their lives might have looked like, a Muggle orphanage or a different family, or the Dursleys' spare room, or Hermione in a different story entirely, not his. He couldn't hold the shape of it for long without it becoming unbearable, for all of it. Harry, Sirius said. His voice was rough. I know, Harry said. You don't have to say it. I want to say it. Sirius cleared his throat. You're the best thing in my life, both of you, you and Hermione, and Remus, and apparently Regulus, which I'm still getting used to because he's extremely annoying, but there it is. He looked at Harry. I wasn't sure I'd be any good at this. At the beginning, standing in Godric's Hollow with you and no plan and no idea what came next, I genuinely wasn't sure. You were good at it, Harry said. We were, Sirius said. All of us, collectively. He paused. It's the thing I didn't know when I started, that it didn't have to be one person, that it could be a catastrophically unconventional family unit, Harry said. Sirius laughed. Yeah, that. He looked up at the first stars coming through. James would have had things to say about how we did this. Good things, Harry said. Mostly he might have had opinions about Regulus. Regulus is his own person, Harry said. James would have seen that eventually. He would have, Sirius agreed. He was good at seeing people. He was quiet for a moment. He would have loved watching you and Hermione, he and Lily together the way they were. They'd have looked at the two of you and they'd have been so proud. Harry looked at the sky. The stars were coming in more now, the Scotland darkness doing what Scotland darkness did, decisive and total and full of light. He thought about the remaining Horcruxes and the math and the work still ahead, the cup in the Lestrange vault. The Ravenclaw object, the snake, the scar, the return that was coming regardless of preparation, the war that wasn't finished, the thing that had started the night he was 1 year old and wouldn't end until it ended completely. He thought about all of it and it sat in him clearly and without panic, the weight of something large that he knew how to carry because he'd been carrying it for years, because he'd been built for carrying it, not because the world had made him carry it, but because the people who loved him had made him strong enough that he didn't notice the weight most of the time. Inside Hermione's voice, that doesn't account for the variable, Regulus. I accounted for the variable. You accounted for a variable, Hermione. This variable specifically, Hermione. Fine, show me you're working. Ron, clearly delighted. This is the most fun dinner I've ever had. Harry stood up from the wall. Sirius stood with him. We should go in, Harry said. Probably, Sirius said. Neither of them moved for another moment, standing in the dark garden with the light from the cottage windows reaching out across the flagstones toward them, warm and specific and entirely theirs. Then Harry said, come on, and went back inside, and the door closed behind them, and the garden was dark and quiet with the birch trees standing white in the night and the stars settled overhead watching. In the kitchen, Regulus was opening the journal to show Hermione a calculation, and she was already leaning forward with her pen, and Ron was watching them both with the cheerful bewilderment of someone who had chosen his friends well and knew it. Remus looked up when Harry and Sirius came in, and his face did the thing it did, the quiet, certain thing, and he pushed the extra chair out with his foot by way of welcome. Harry sat down, the family arranged around the table. All of it, the grief they'd come from, the work still ahead, the Horcruxes and the math and the 70%, Pettigrew in custody and Sirius nearly free and Regulus out of the shadows and Remus teaching defense in September, and the war that was coming regardless of preference. All of it was true and all of it was present, and none of it was, right now, the most important thing. The most important thing was this: the light in the kitchen and the voices and the argument about magical theory that Ron was now actively participating in despite having claimed earlier not to follow it, and Creature in the corner looking at all of them with his ancient face full of something that was not quite pride but was not far from it either. Harry put his elbow on the table and joined the argument. Outside, the night did what it did. Inside, the family held.